And welcome back to the 2023 release roundup. This time, it's part 2. If you somehow found yourself to this video and have not seen part 1, that's okay. You don't really need to watch that one to enjoy this one, but it does have a bunch of legacy support cards, so if there was something you were looking forward to seeing us cover here that didn't show up, you might want to check part 1. In this video, we'll be covering the latter half of the cards that we got legacy support for in 2023 that were previously covered by explained videos. Let's rock! Today's episode is brought to you by my lovely patrons, as well as the wonderful people over at Dragon Shield. Get the sleeves as strong as dragon scales and save 5% on your order by using coupon code GoldenNova at checkout. Raidraptors. If I recall correctly, this was my first big video, because even back then, Raidraptors was a huge theme thanks to the wealth of anime support, legit competitive power, and crossovers with Phantom Knights. And the core set Phantom Nightmare did not miss a chance to carry on after the boost they got from Phantom Rage. Let's check them out. Raidraptor Bloom Vulture is a level 4 dark winged beast monster with 300 attack and 1900 defense, and if you don't control any face-up monsters other than winged beasts, you can special summon both this card and a Raidraptor monster from your hand. If you control no monsters, you can target 2 level 4 or lower Raidraptor monsters in your grave, including this card, and special summon them in defense position. You can only use one effect of this card per turn, and only once per turn, and you can't special summon monsters the turn you activate either effect, except dark monsters. This makes for a pretty spectacular enabler. Without using your normal summon, you get 2 raptors out of your hand, and even if they don't match levels, you can just link them away to make something like Ystrix. The grave effect is a bit more strict, you really do need an empty board, but you can pick from the whole grave, not just your hand. It doesn't negate any effects, and doesn't even apply a self-banishing condition, which I find to be very generous. Not that it would mean too much, this is an Xyz deck after all, but it's the thought that counts. And I think this makes for the first good Vulture in Raidraptors? Hey, good job! Raidraptor Noir Lanius is a level 4 dark winged beast monster with 1600 attack and 500 defense, and during your main phase, if this card was normal or special summoned this turn, you can target a Raidraptor monster you control to add a Raidraptor monster from your deck to your hand with a different level from the targeted monster. You can also banish this card from your grave to increase or decrease the level of your Raidraptor monsters you currently control by 1. So there's nothing stopping you from having it target itself, so you can grab a non-level 4, which is perfect for grabbing Pain Lanius, and if you end up having any of those non-level 4s on board, you can instead search out your bottomless pit of level 4 enablers. And the level modulation means you can access Blaze Falcon without a rank up magic, or Fiend Eagle, a rank 3 in a deck with very few good level 3 monsters, giving you a chance to ping your opponent for another good chunk of damage. More search redundancy doesn't change the game plan much, but does mean we can do it more consistently, with the level modulation helping to open up those new game plans. And also, it's got a great eye for detective novels. Having a well-read deck is a huge plus for me. Raidraptor Bravestrix is a rank 5 dark winged beast Xyz monster with 2000 attack and 2500 defense, requiring any 2 level 5 monsters as material. You can detach a material from this card to set a Raidraptor spell or trap card directly from your deck, and if this card has a winged beast monster as material, you can detach a material from this card to add a rank up magic spell card from your deck to your hand. But you can only use one effect of this card per turn, and only once per turn. And a Raidraptor Xyz monster that has this card as material gains an effect that grants it 100 attack times its own rank. Okay, so this is another good card for Noir Lanius to help us get into, because our level 5s, don't exist. Making this generically gets you access to on-theme spells and traps, which is kind of odd, though does have applications in regard to the Raiders combo of this and Phantom Knights, with some of those cards counting as both archetypes. But if we can sneak in a winged beast, largely to check if we're on theme properly, we just get any rank up magic in the game, which is really bonkers. There are so many that do so many things, it's hard to fathom the lines of play that are possible once you pull this off. And if you rank this up while staying on theme, that monster is going to get huge. Even going up 1 rank means that monster is going to gain 600 attack, and folks, Revolution Falcon Air Raid never stopped being a good card. The Dark Winged Beast pile hasn't taken off in recent years, but for those of you who are brave enough to run it, I hope you're the best. Raidraptor Rising Rebellion Falcon is a rank 13! Dark Winged Beast Xyz monster with 4,000 attack and 3,500 defense, requiring 5 level 13 Winged Beast monsters as material, which don't exist, making this material requirement one of the funniest in-jokes in the game. It might as well just read, "Get your rank up magics ready." If this card is Xyz summoned, you can destroy as many cards your opponent controls as possible. Then, if this card has 3 or more Raidraptor Xyz monsters with different names as material, burn your opponent for damage equal to the destroyed monster's total original attack. It's unaffected by other cards' effects, and once per turn, you can detach 3 material from this card, then target a Raidraptor Xyz monster in your grave, and replace this effect with that monster's effects until the end phase. Wow, this is just so cool. Whoever designed this was clearly having the time of their lives. Now sadly, this isn't our first rank 13 monster. That honor goes to Imaginary Chaos number 1000, Numeronius Numeronia, but this might be the first one that actually sees some level of play. Even just being a one-sided board wipe means it demands an answer, which will be difficult to find considering this is unaffected by all other cards' effects. The extra burn damage is nice if you meet the bonus requirement, which we can achieve by either climbing the rank up ladder or a card we'll get into in just a bit. But regardless, it's still a 4,000 attacker, so that's going to do a lot to close out the game once you've cleared out your opponent's board. And then you have to factor in the effect copying effect. A lot of them require your opponent to have monsters, which won't factor in a lot since you've blown them up. But Arsenal Falcon gives you unrestricted extra attacks if you can manage to keep some extra material under it after the effect copying. This is as close as you're going to get to an I win button in this deck, so if you're playing Modern Raidraptors, get ready to bust this out to show all those dragons out there the true power of Rebellion. Rise Rank Up Magic Raidraptor's Force is a quick play spell card that you can activate during either main phase or your opponent's battle phase. Target 2 or more Raidraptor Xyz monsters that you control and or are in your grave, including a monster on the field. Special summon from your extra deck a Raidraptor Xyz monster whose rank equals those 2 or more monsters' total ranks, and if you do, attach those monsters to it as material, which is treated as an Xyz summon, transferring all of their material to this new monster. That's right, we're synchro summoning with Xyz monsters now! Like a demolitions expert, there's no barrier in this game that card design cannot break through. Now, this is going to be tough to use on our lower ranked Xyz, so this is largely to be used to deploy our rank 12s and 13. Toss 3 level 4s or 2 6s together to make Ultimate or Final Fortress Falcon, or replace one of those 4s with a 5 to make Rising Rebellion. And guess what? Brave Strix is a rank 5, can search this card, and is a monster on the field. Hopefully. So now you just need a couple of rank 4s in rotation, and you're going to be ready to subject your opponent to some of that Shea Obsidian flavored oblivion. Raidraptor Roost is a continuous spell card, and if any number of Raidraptor monsters are special summoned from the extra deck to your field, except during the damage step, you can add a Raidraptor spell or trap card from your deck to your hand, except a copy of this card. You can also target 3 of your Raidraptor monsters that are banished and or are in your grave, place them on the bottom of the deck in any order, then draw a card. This is... I don't know how I feel about this one, actually. Because of the search trigger specifically off of extra deck summoning, it feels like they want you to grab a rank up magic to help you climb the Xyz ladder, though thankfully they have given you the flexibility to search any on-theme spell or trap. And that's not terrible, it's just underwhelming. So it's gonna have to be propped up by that secondary effect, which is also just okay. It's a recycler that draws you a card, so this goes plus on card economy almost as soon as it hits the field, and because it recycles Raidraptor monsters, you can get back your Xyz, Lynx, or just main deck extenders. I leave it up to the Raidraptor fans in the audience to let me know if this is truly a good card to help with their main game plan, or if it's just a win more. But as a deck focused on powerful attacks that don't prioritize defense, having a move that restores your HP and gets rid of your Rock and Thunder weakness seems kinda dope. Raidraptor Barrage is a normal trap card that you can activate if you control a Raidraptor monster. Target a face-up monster your opponent controls, or any face-up card they control instead if you have a Raidraptor Xyz monster, and negate its effects until the end phase. And you can banish this card from your grave, then target a Raidraptor monster that is banished or is in your grave and add it to your hand. You can only use one effect per turn, and only once per turn. This is another option you can grab off of Brave Strix or Roost, and going first, it's not terrible, especially if you have no good rank up magic targets to get. It's a negate for any face-up card that recycles you a monster on the following turn. This actually seems like a solid piece of support. It's a good one-of that gives you a turn 1 play. Kinda hard to argue not giving this the last slot in your deck. though I do have to argue about the name. A single shot, even if it is coming from Ultimate Falcon itself, is hardly a barrage. Now Super Dreadnoughts and Zodiacs, now they know how to do a barrage. Red Dragon Archfiend. That's right, the Master of Fostas, making waves with his new structure deck, and, apropos of nothing, is actually making a splash, even if they are just ending up as pieces for larger piles. But since Jack's deck is a hodgepodge of fiends and dragons, I don't think he'd actually mind. Vision Resonator is a level 2 Dark Fiend tuner monster with 400 attack and defense, and if a level 5 or higher dark monster is on the field, you can special summon this card from your hand. And you can only special summon Vision Resonators once per turn this way. If this card is sent to the grave, you can add a spell or trap card that mentions Red Dragon Archfiend from your deck to your hand. This boils down to a free tuner you can summon while you have a big monster on board, but gets you a bonus anytime it goes to the grave, making it a highly versatile enabler. Our search targets are pretty narrow, largely only being the ones we'll talk about in just a bit, but there are some older ones worth highlighting. Scarlet Security, for instance, becomes a searchable Harpy's Feather Duster if the monster you synced into was Red Dragon Archfiend, or any of the monsters that take on its name. And Red Cocoon is a nifty card that, at worst, is good discard fodder that gives you back an RDA during an end phase. But the most important part is the ship reference! Folks, if you don't think that Jack and Carly are cute as a button together, we can't be friends. Soul Resonator is a level 3 Fire Fiend tuner monster with 500 attack and 200 defense, and if this card is normal or special summoned, you can add a level 4 or lower Fiend monster from your deck to your hand, except copies of this card. Also, you can't special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of the turn, except Dark Synchro monsters. And if any number of cards you control would be destroyed by a card effect while you control Red Dragon Archfiend, or a Synchro monster that mentions it, you can banish this card from your grave instead. Now, the level 4 or lower Fiend pool is huge, but locking us into Dark Synchros does mean we aren't likely to be splashing this into decks like Burning Abyss and Unchained. Thankfully, we have a lot of good targets, but one of the best is coming up in just a bit, and having some destruction protection as a bonus is a nice touch. But I'm worried it's gonna get out of hand pretty soon. Not in the game, but you can't take the Crimson Devil and seal it away in a Resonator monster. Jack needed special signer powers for that. Bone Archfiend is a level 4 Dark Fiend monster with 1800 attack and 0 defense, and if this card is in your hand or grave, you can send one other card from your hand or field to the graveyard to special summon this card. Also, you can't special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of the turn, except Dark Dragon Synchro monsters. You can target a face-up monster you control that has a level and send a Fiend Tuner from your hand or deck to the grave, and if you do, increase or decrease that monster's level by 1. So it's good level 4 material that level modulates while setting up your grave, and it enables a pretty spicy playline. Grab this off of Soul Resonator, pitching another card to summon it. Use Bone to send Crimson Resonator, bumping up either of their levels by 1. From that point, you can Synchro summon Red Rising Dragon, which revives the Crimson Resonator with its effect, and now you can use its effect to get even more tuners, immediately getting you into Red Supernova Dragon. The fact that such a ridiculous card is accessible off of a single starter and a discard is amazing, and really goes to show you that this deck is bad to the bone. Archfiend. Scarred Dragon Archfiend, I see what you did there, is a level 8 Dark Dragon Synchro monster with 3000 attack and 2500 defense, requiring a tuner and one or more dark non-tuner monsters as material. This card's name becomes Red Dragon Archfiend while on the field or in the grave, and if this card is sent from the monster zone to the grave, you can special summon a Red Dragon Archfiend from your extra deck, which is treated as a Synchro summon. Then, if this card was sent to the grave as Synchro material for a Dark Dragon Synchro monster, you can destroy all attack position monsters your opponent controls. This boils down to being 2 level 8 Dragon Synchro material, which is bananas. You effectively get 2 big RDAs for the price of 1, while getting to Lightning Storm your opponent's monster, and trust me, we have some outrageous big RDAs to use, ranging from Quick Effect Negation to Graveyard Recursion. This deck's been through a lot, but that just means we get to show off our battle scars. Absolute Power Force is a quick play spell card that targets a Red Dragon Archfiend you control. If it battles an opponent's monster this turn while you control it, apply these effects until the end of the turn. It gains 1000 attack, your opponent can't activate cards or effects, it deals piercing battle damage, and any battle damage your opponent takes from that battle is doubled. Gotta love those signature attack cards, especially the ones that are the same name as core sets. This gives your RDAs, and monsters that take on their name, a bit more oomph in combat, potentially ending the game outright if you can get enough damage to double. And while it is technically searchable, cards like this are more for being flashy and less for being competitively viable. But still, if you want to pull off cool stuff, it's a pretty slick option. You could say it really packs a punch, because of the pack that is named after this attack. Crimson Gaia is a continuous spell card, and during your main phase, you can add a Red Dragon Archfiend, or a card that mentions it, from your deck or grave to your hand, except a copy of this card. When your Red Dragon Archfiend declares an attack, you can change all monsters your opponent controls to face-down defense position, and if any number of monsters on the field are destroyed by a battle or card effect, you can special summon a Red Dragon Archfiend from your grave. Which is sweet, because the summon that you get off of Scard going to the graveyard is a proper Synchro summon, so if you want OG RDA, that's a pretty good option. What you can do is attack with one of your RDAs, flip down your opponent's entire field, then when it destroys a monster by battle, trigger that summon, get back the original, have it attack into your opponent's monsters, triggering its effect to blast their entire field, giving you room for the rest of your monsters to swing in for game. And that's all without mentioning its ability to boost your consistency. Crimson Gaia and Vision Resonator can search each other, and while you can't grab Bone Archfiend with it, Soul Resonator does. And Gaia can even act as the card you have to send to the graveyard to summon Bone Archfiend from hand, meaning you don't even need that discard if you don't mind losing its secondary effects. And you can do this every turn! So it's hard to overstate just how much this does for the theme, taking its power from explosive to a full-blown eruption. Fiendish Golem is a normal trap card that targets a monster on the field with 2,000 or more attack. Banish it until the end phase of the next turn, then if you activate this card while you controlled Red Dragon Archfiend or a Synchro monster that mentions it, you can set a Fiendish Chain directly from your deck. Okay, this card is the bad one out of the set, I'm sorry. Attempt Banishing is useful sometimes, but does need to be more effective than a normal trap card. And the bonus effect giving you Fiendish Chain is insulting since that card's been power crept since, forever ago. I mean, it had its heyday, but get with the times. Kids are playing Imperm as their trap card interruption of choice nowadays. The only saving grace is that this possibly means we may get an updated art from Inner Crescent as a follow-up to their sweet 3D Fiendish Chain art. You know, if you need ideas, just saying. Red Zone is a continuous trap card that when your opponent activates a card or effect while you control Red Dragon Archfiend or a Synchro monster that mentions it, you can target a card on the field and destroy it. And it can also target one of your banished Dark Dragon Synchro monsters and special summon it. So you get some retaliatory removal once you've set up your boss monster, which ain't bad, but the main drive here is to help support Red Nova and Red Supernova dragons, because much like these Stardust monsters, they leave the field to activate their effects. So if you banish your opponent's field with Supernova, you can bring it right back with Red Zone, and if they somehow get out of hand again, you can banish them again because their effect is not once per turn. How's that for being in the zone? Rescue Ace. Set 4 Pass has never been as fun as it is when you're riding with the firefighters. While they are the unfortunate receivers of an airlifter limit on the ban list, they still have access to the ridiculous Diabellstar engine, so they aren't out of the fight yet. Let's see what some new recruits can do to bolster the theme. Remember, their spells and traps count as Rescue Ace cards. Rescue Ace Preventer is a level 8 fire machine monster with 2800 attack and defense, and you can banish a Rescue Ace monster from your grave to special summon this card from your hand. If you control another Rescue Ace monster as a quick effect, you can target an effect monster your opponent controls and change it to face down defense position. If this card is sent to the grave, you can target one of your banished Rescue Ace monsters except a level 8 and special summon it. Now this card is something else. It does a lot to bolster the theme all by itself. At the cost of only a single Rescue Ace monster from your grave, you get a huge body, a Book of Moon once you get Preventer a sidekick, and if it goes to the grave for any reason, you get back one of your banished monsters, something you're not only doing with Preventer, but with Turbulence as well. And it just so happens that we have the perfect card to pair with this coming up in just a little bit. It really is the perfect combination of form and flavor, because between the monster flipping, field presence, and recovery, you'll be preventing your opponent from taking the win. Emergency is a quick play spell card that special summons a Rescue Ace monster from your deck in defense position, then tributes a Rescue Ace monster from your hand or field. And during your main phase, you can banish this card from your grave, then target a Rescue Ace trap card in your grave and set it. Now, the bad news is that this will resolve as a -1, and unless you want this to be one of the game's most convoluted foolish burials, you do already need to have another Rescue Ace on hand to eat the tribute. That being said, using this to turn any of your Rescue Aces into an onboard Turbulence is a trade I'll take any day of the week. weak. It's part of the reason why the Airlifter hit is so significant. It searches Emergency, then you can play it, and you'd have a guaranteed Rescue Ace to tribute in Airlifter. And on top of all that, its quick play nature helps you play through cards like Imperm and Valor by getting the target off the field before that resolves. And bonus, if we tribute Preventer, we get back a banished Rescue Ace, letting you go even on card economy. And because that wasn't enough, you also get to banish it from grave to reset one of your Rescue Ace trap cards, which basically doesn't really hurt you at all because your field spell recycles cards from your grave and the banished zone. I've gotta say, as far as emergency quick play spell cards go, this is easily in the top 3. Reinforce is a normal trap card that targets a Rescue Ace monster you control, and for the rest of the turn, that monster gains 1500 attack and defense, is unaffected by your opponent's monster effects, and the next time it would be destroyed by battle, it's not. You can also banish this card from your grave, then target a Rescue Ace spell card in your grave and set it. Reinforce feels like such a natural card for this theme. Like, all it does is keep a monster safe for the turn, which wouldn't see a play in a lot of decks. But because our main game plan revolves around grabbing a bunch of spells and traps at once, it can easily just be thrown into the mix without much issue. 1500 is an absurd bonus, letting your smaller monsters get over some truly heinous threats, and when you factor in the monster effect protection and one-time battle immunity, they really do just have to use spells and traps to deal with that monster, which isn't always going to be feasible. Also, I didn't mention it before, but Emergency and Reinforce are the first Rescue Ace spell traps that don't have a bonus if Hydrant is on the board, so you can use them without a care in the world. That being said, the art for this card is making me think there's more going on behind the scenes than we've been told. I was all for high-tech firefighters, but this looks like the fire is fighting back. What's going on here? Ritual Beasts. Let's give it up for Terminal World one more time! It's truly been a brilliant set, both for revitalizing themes from Terminus and giving me more questions about the lore that we don't have answers to yet. I really do have a love-hate relationship with this narrative, don't I? Anyway, Spiritual Beast Tamer Lara is a level 1, light, psychic monster, that's new, with 100 attack and 2000 defense. And as usual with the Ritual Beast monsters, you can only special summon copies of this card once per turn. You can discard this card, and immediately after this effect resolves, normal summon a Ritual Beast monster from your hand. If any number of Ritual Beast cards you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can banish this card from your grave instead, and if this card is banished, you can special summon a Ritual Beast monster from your deck except a copy of this card. Wow, when it comes to legacy support that does everything, this card takes the cake. It might not seem like it on the surface, but I'm going to go ahead and break it down for you. Most of our Ritual Beast combos start with at least 2 cards, ideally Elder and Kanahawk. But by having Spiritual Beast Tamer Lara in rotation, we can now start an entire combo with just Kanahawk. You normal summon the Kanahawk, banish this monster from your deck, triggering the on banish effect to summon a Tamer from your deck, and go wild from there. And as it turns out, Kanahawk is not the only way to get all this started, so go ahead and check out the card pool, you might be surprised. And the extra normal summon effect is huge. All of our Tamers only trigger on normal summon, so having extras is going to be extremely useful for extension. But there's more to it than that. Remember that each Ritual Beast main deck monster can only be special summoned once per turn, because if you didn't have that effect, things would get out of control very quickly. But you can normal summon them as many times per turn as you want, if you have the normal summons for it. So if you can search or recycle copies of monsters you've already special summoned this turn, Lara's extra normal summon effect lets you bypass the restriction altogether, and you get the effects of those monsters again because they do not have hard once per turns on them. Except for Elder and Ulti Kimun Falcos, but it's always worth emphasizing. Even Lara's protection effect is stellar, as it keeps your monsters safe from targeted destruction or board wipes, and it will trigger its summon effect because it banishes itself to do so. There is no way for me to overstate just how good this card is. I think Lara actually might be in serious contention for Dual Terminal's best girl at this point. Ritual Beast Ulti Nakyu Drago is a level 7 light worm fusion monster. Konami, I see what you're doing! With 2400 attack and 1900 defense, requiring a Ritual Beast Tamer and Spiritual Beast monster as material. You don't use polymerization for its summon, you instead banish the required material from your field and or grave, and you can only special summon copies of this card once per turn. Your opponent cannot target other Ritual Beast monsters with card effects, and as a quick effect, you can return this card to the extra deck, then target one of your banished Ritual Beast monsters and special special summon it, but it cannot attack directly. So this doesn't look particularly impressive. The lightning rod effect is useful for keeping the heat off of ulti Kanahawk, so that your opponent can't force you to tag it out with Imperm before you activate its surge effect. And the fact that it allows you to summon back materials in attack position for the first time is appreciated, but it's a little lacking since it only brings back one monster as opposed to the usual two. Not to mention that it can't attack directly. Like ever. But trust me, this card is much better than it seems, because unlike our other fusions, it allows you to banish the material from the grave, just like ABC Dragon Buster, which means it complements Link summoning perfectly, especially when it comes to ulti Kimun Falcos. It's a fantastic card, but its issue has always been the fact that Link material go to the grave when you use them for summons, meaning that it can't tag out without having to do some legwork by using Apelio or Gold Sarcophagus to set up the material to do so. But after going into Kimun Falcos, you can just banish those material right out of the graveyard to summon Yugioh, and with that, you're not only set up to tag out Kimun Falcos, but the rest of your play sequence is now more or less safe from getting squashed by your opponent's targeted effects. And of course, summoning this does trigger Spiritual Lara, so it can even act as a combo enabler. But, what's going on here? I'm willing to run with the fact that Lara is light attribute now. Fine, it's post-war, maybe they got some kind of power-up that turns them light, that's fine. But Yugioh depicts her riding what looks like a purified version of Daotia, Shadow of the Yang Zing, a monster we have not seen since the beginning of Age 3.0. I mean, if it implies that we'll be getting more Yang Zing support in the future, I'm not going to be complaining about it. That theme is too cool to have never gotten an update. So I'm just gonna move on to the next card before I start fuming about this again. Ritual Beast ulti Raidraptor is a Link 4 Wind Psychic Link monster with 2600 attack, requiring 3 or more effect monsters as material. Neither player can tribute cards to activate card effects, and you can target one of your banished Ritual Beast cards, return it to the hand or extra deck, then immediately after this effect resolves, normal summon a Ritual Beast monster from your hand. And during your opponent's turn, you can target a Ritual Beast card you control and a card your opponent controls, and banish them. No two ways about it, this card is a beast. A pun very much intended. The first effect is obviously meant to counteract the Infernoid effects that have them tributing themselves, which is a nice touch, but it also causes a bunch of other decks to get caught in the crossfire. Rika, Magispectors, Ursarctic, sorry Pillock, and Drytron, to name a few. But hilariously, it doesn't stop all tributing, just ones that activate cards and effects, so you can still get Kaiju'd, which is kind of warranted because the banishing DPE effect is brutal. It does target, which can be seen as a downside, but don't worry, we have a way to twist it to our advantage. You simply target one of your on-theme fusions, except Ulti Gaia Pelio, which doesn't have this effect, chain the fusion's effect to tag it out, return it to the extra deck to summon your Tamer and Beast, and when Raidraptor resolves, only your opponent loses a monster, since the effect says banish them, not banish both targets. It's absolutely heinous. And if that wasn't enough for you already, we have another way to get extra normal summons. I can feel Floowanderee's players blushing as I speak. And like those fluffy little war criminals, we can even use that effect to recycle our spells and traps, since it lets us scoop up any on-theme card from the banished zone, not just monsters. And Spiritual Beast Apelio is a great way to get those cards where you need them. Lastly, there's one trick I didn't mention in the last section covering ulti Yugioh, because I was waiting for this card to come up in order to have the most impact with it. Notice that ulti Yugioh summons a Ritual Beast monster with its tag out effect. Well, that includes our Link monsters. You'll have to properly summon this card to do so no Ritual Beast spawn shenanigans here, but if Raidraptor gets knocked out, all you gotta do is banish it from the grave with a card like Spiritual Beast Apelio, and from that point you can summon it back with ulti Yugioh's effect, even if it's not able to attack directly. Overall, it's a fantastic card to cap off the theme, and not a fantastic card to cap off my lore analysis. Like, now we have a second purified Yang Zing in the form of Yazi joining the Ritual Beasts. What on Sophia's green terminus is going on here? Is this a result of the offense going on in Metaltroniosis? I knew that Zephyr Metaltron was made specifically to mess with me! Ritual Beast Inheritance is a continuous spell card that makes all monsters your opponent controls lose 200 attack for each type among Ritual Beast monsters you control. You can reveal a Ritual Beast monster in your hand to add a Ritual Beast monster with a different type from your deck to your hand, then discard a card. And if 2 or more monsters are summoned to your field at the same time, you can target one monster on the field and change its battle position. Finally, an honest-to-goodness monster searcher! Ritual beasts are very good at generating immense amounts of value from only 1 or 2 cards. The downside is that they have to be very specific cards, so when ritual beasts brick, they brick hard. But if you've got Inheritance, you're all but guaranteed to have what you need on startup. There is a caveat where you need to have a on-theme monster in hand beforehand to use the effect at all, but that's a worthwhile trade-off with how little we need to get started. And while that discard may seem like a bummer, remember that because of yugioh, we now have a way to contact Fuse out of the graveyard, so it can actually enable us. Especially when you get Spiritual Lara into the mix. And that debuff ain't too shabby either. Our monsters don't exactly have the greatest stats, not even Raidraptor, up 2600 isn't too impressive for a Link 4. And Ultia Paleo's effect, while one of the safest monsters to swing in with, always does so with a static 2600 because it's immune to all effects, not just your opponent's, so it falls flat in battle against anything bigger no matter how many buffs you apply. But giving your opponent a debuff is a great way to help out with that. Lastly, we can use that position switch effect to keep ourselves alive against massive threats by tagging out our fusions in the battle phase. But we can also use it offensively by tagging out during our own battle phase, then turning one of those summoned monsters to attack position. It's enough to make dedicated pilots cry for joy, as well as crying for other reasons. Man, this set's just too much. Runick. When I first saw this deck, I hardly thought it would reach the heights it has now. What appeared on the surface to be Yu-Gi-Oh's first successful mill deck was that, and also one of the strongest resource engines available. Turns out skipping battle phases wasn't enough to deter people from the allure of draw 3 and extra deck material. They didn't gain any new spells this time around, but now they have a new monster that you could say is generating a lot of controversy. Sleipnir, the Runick main, is a level 9 Light Beast fusion monster with 1500 attack and defense, requiring any 2 Runick monsters as material, though remember we can also summon this with any Runick quick play spell card. During your main phase, or your opponent's battle phase as a quick effect, you can target a face-up monster your opponent controls and banish both that monster and this card until the end phase. And if any number of cards are added from the main deck to your opponent's hand, except during the damage step, you can special summon a Runick token in attack position, which is a level 4 Light Fairy monster with 1500 attack and defense. A suspiciously similar stat line to generator tokens, as it turns out. In fact, being a level 9 monster, as well as the trigger being on your opponent's draw, is more than enough to make the connection between the two themes. Though, if all the Lopter cameos up till this point didn't tip you off, I don't really know how much more clear we can get with this. But that's about as far as that crossover's gonna get. If you're curious, just look up Loki and Sleipnir, and you'll find out why they aren't gonna be adapting that myth much further, no matter how many legs this monster has to stand on. S-Force. SP Little Knight is a bit of a sour spot for a lot of players for good reason, but I'll bet that nobody's quite as salty as S-Force players. I mean, one of their top officers just quits, then immediately starts showing up in every top list and destroys the secondary market. Probably isn't doing them a lot of favors. But we do have a new recruit to help us out, so let's see what they can do. S-Force Night Chaser is a Link 1 Dark Cybers Link monster with 800 attack, requiring a non-Link S-Force monster as material. Each of your opponent's monsters in the same column as your S-Force monsters can't target monsters in the same column for attacks, and during the main phase as a quick effect, you can target an S-Force monster you control, shuffle it into the deck, then special summon one of your banished S-Force monsters. While it kinda stinks that you can almost never have this card on the field at the same time as Justify thanks to all 3 of their Link arrows pointing at our opponent, this is actually really nifty. Let's talk about the column effect first. It doesn't feel like anything special, what's gonna stop your opponent from just aiming their monsters at something else, right? Until you realize that Rapid Chiyomaru prevents your opponent from attacking anything but the S-Force monster in their column. So if you get her on board alongside Night Chaser, it's actually an attack lock. The mileage you get out of this will vary, but Night Chaser's quick effect is brilliant. Up until now, Chiyomaru was the only way to dispatch our officers at a reasonable pace, making punishing our opponent for playing around our columns a little harder than it should be. So while Night Chaser's toolbox isn't as broad as Chiyomaru's, having another way to quick summon on theme monsters is very useful. And it also doesn't cost you any cards in hand to pull off. But there is a bit of a snag here. S-Force currently doesn't have very many outlets for banishing monsters. There's Chiyomaru, Retroactive, and Lapswell. That's it. Not only that, but Retroactive only banishes itself and Chiyomaru and Lapswell only banished cards in your hand, so it's still horrendously inefficient. As a result, until we get some on-theme way to banish our monsters directly from the deck, Night Chaser's gonna be held back by almost never having the right options to pull from when it matters. But something's just occurring to me. We have archetypes for both the police and firefighters. When do we get a paramedic archetype to complete the emergency services trio? Sacred Beasts. Looks like the Yubel support is having a bit of a knock-on effect for the rest of the game. Not only did Phantom Nightmare have a massive update for the strategy, as well as some new stuff coming out of Legacy of Destruction. Hold your horses! This villain's secondary archetype, the Sacred Beasts, just got a new Beast of Burden to help mobilize them. Phantasmal Summoning Beast is a level 7 Dark Fiend monster with 0 attack and defense that you contribute to add a Uriah, Lord of Searing Flames, Hamon, Lord of Striking Thunder, or Raviel, Lord of Phantasms from your deck or grave to your hand. Then you can special summon a level 10 Pyro, Thunder, or Fiend monster from your hand whose attack equals their own defense, ignoring summoning conditions, but it can't attack directly this turn. You can also banish this card from your grave to add a Dimension Fusion Destruction from your deck to your hand. Now, that high level might scare you away. Most of our powerful summoning beasts are small enough to normal summon, but by using the revival effect of Opening of the Spirit Gates, this is about as easy to summon as it gets. It even compresses some of the roles of Chaos Summoning and Dark Beckoning Beast, though you'll still want to run both for their other effects. So it's more like having some extra redundancy here. But the big bonus is that it gets you the on-theme fusion spell, and because you'll control one of the Sacred Beasts after using its effect, that spell will be spell speed 4. If you've gotten all the pieces into rotation, including your grave, you can either summon the original Armatael to close out the game, or summon the Phantom of Fury variant if the way isn't that clear, board wiping your opponent while still getting original Armatael eventually. This is a pretty nice addition, letting you streamline your way to an OTK if needed, but doesn't otherwise mix up your game plan. If anything, it shows off just how emaciated their strategy really is. Like, can we get this thing to the cafeteria already? We've got to put some meat on those bones! Salamangreat. This card really snuck in there at the last moment, huh? Salamangreat may be Rotation Yu-Gi-Oh's most recent boogeyman, but the new support didn't do too much to get it out ahead of the pack in the game proper. But what if we added in even more Playmaker and Soul Burner shipping? Surely that'll fix it. Code of Soul is a level 3 Fire Cyberse monster, and if you control a Link monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. During your main phase, you can activate this effect. Once this turn, if you Link summon a Salamangreat Link monster, you can use one Salamangreat Link monster you control with its same name as the entire material. And during your opponent's main phase, as a quick effect, you can banish this card from your grave to, immediately after this effect resolves, Link summon a Link 3 or higher Cyberse monster. So sadly, it's not a Salamangreat card itself, so it doesn't benefit from the direct support, but there's a lot of cards that work with Fires and Cyberses in the theme, so this nearly fits the bill. On field, it's extra material, plus Salamangreat Sanctuary in case the original gets beefed somehow, and is a quick link on the opponent's turn. And as it turns out, the pool of Link 3 or higher Cyberse monsters is actually quite large, featuring 45 different monsters at time of recording, including a ton of the Code Talker monsters. Decode and Heat Soul are pretty nice, but you can also link into any of the Firewall dragons, but probably the best use for it is the quick link of Pyro Phoenix into another Pyro Phoenix on the opponent's turn, using an active Sanctuary to pull off that reincarnation summon during the middle of their combos. This is another neat little tool to add to the Fire Animals roster, though I do find it funny that the best new support for Salamangreat didn't even come out in the pack they headlined. God, I love marketing. Shinobirrds. Spirit monsters are a cool concept, and they've been getting some completely off-the-wall support in recent years. But who'd have thought that combining this subtype with rituals, a type of monster that's infamous for being inefficient to summon in the first place, not to mention being inherently aligned with special summoning, since spirits very much do not special summon, would work well with them at all? Well, as it turns out, we've got some new toys for everyone's favorite Amano Awato enabler, and they are wonderful. Shinobirrds Shade Peacock is a level 4 Wind-Winged Beast Ritual Spirit monster with 2000 attack and 1500 defense. You can ritual summon this card using Shinobirds Calling, and its name becomes Shinobirrds Peacock while in the hand or on the field. You can tribute this ritual summoned card to add a spirit monster and a ritual spell from your deck to your hand, and once per turn, during the standby phase of the next turn after this card was banished, special summon this banished card. And during the end phase of the turn this card was special summoned, return it to the hand. Both of these effects are fantastic. Pre-preparation of Rites sees play in just about every ritual deck that can run it because of how good it is. So having our own, while still being able to run pre-prep, absolutely rocks. The fact that we have to tribute this card to get that effect seems a bit flimsy at first glance. You do give up 4 levels of ritual fodder by doing this, except we actually don't, because Shinobirrds Calling lets us banish spirit monsters as material right out of the grave. So really, we don't lose anything. In fact, because of the revival effect needing it to be banished, it actually enables us. But it's impossible to talk about Shinobirrn without also talking about his partner. Shinobirrness Shade Peacock is a level 4 Wind-Winged Beast ritual spirit monster with 1500 attack and 2000 defense. It has most of the same effects as Shinobirrn Shade, but its name becomes Shinobirrness Peacock while in the hand or on the field. And when they're ritual summoned, you can add a spell or trap card that mentions spirit monster in its card text from your deck to your hand. So if Shinobirrn Shade sets up the summoning of our grown-up rituals, Shinobirrness Shade gets us all of our support cards. Every spell and trap in our theme lists spirit monsters, so you can get Power Spot to grab an extra ritual card if you need it, or heck, cut out the middleman and add another Shinobirds Calling if you'd like. Or we could get Shinobirds Salvation to keep our opponent out of our face if we end on an empty board, and pop some cards whenever our spirits bounce. You can also grab some of the off-theme spirit support back row if you want, not that any of it is really worth playing. And because Baroness Shade also revives itself from the banished zone, it and Baron Shade make the perfect ritual fodder duo. These two monsters are a huge game changer for Shinobirds, and knowing that they'll eventually grow up to make one of the greatest power couples in the game is just so heartwarming. Stars Align Above the Shrine is a field spell card that, once per turn, lets you ritual summon a wind ritual monster from your deck by tributing spirit monsters and or Shinobird tokens from your field whose total levels equal or exceed the ritual monster's level. And twice per turn, if any number of face-up wind monsters you control return to the hand, except during the damage step, you can activate one of 2 effects. Either add one of your spirit monsters or ritual spells that are banished or in your grave to your hand, or set a copy of Stars Align Across the Milky Way directly from your deck. You want some efficiency? Well, you found it. Up until now, the only method outside of Shinobirds Calling for ritual summoning was the Impcantation engine. So having another, less bricky way to do this that's also searchable by terraforming does a great job at taking the pressure off of us to recycle Calling. And it gets better because this is a repeatable effect that ritual summons from the deck, which is incredible for deploying our new ritual monsters. And once you do that, they'll get us the tools we need to summon our big rituals without having to faff about getting them into our hand first. Although, we can ritual summon any wind ritual monster with this, so get your copies of Buford the Ninth while you still can, folks. We do have to tribute Shinobird tokens and spirit monsters to do the ritual summon with this card, but like I mentioned earlier, spirits have great support. You're probably not going to be struggling with this. And by simply playing our deck correctly, this field spell goes ahead and recycles our resources for nothing. Twice per turn at that, although we don't necessarily have to wait until the end phase to do it. If we're being little mavericks and playing a pure Shinobird package, then Pigeon can trigger this effect early. And we've even gone ahead and went full Vaylantz and claimed an earlier free agent card as our own with that last effect. Though to be fair, it was on the art. The question is, what does this card do for us? Well, we didn't cover that card in Shinobirds Explained since it didn't exist at the time, but it came out in 2022 and this is a 2023 release roundup. But now that the card has formally been inducted into the archetype, let's go ahead and do a bit of a retcon and cover it right now. Stars Align Across the Milky Way is a normal trap card that has you revealing a ritual monster in your hand to add a ritual monster with the same level but a different name from your deck to your hand. And you can banish this card from your grave to send a ritual spell from your hand to the grave, and this effect becomes the sent card's effect that ritual summons a monster on activation. So by itself, it secures the fodder to ensure that you can perform your ritual summon. Then if you've got the ritual spell as well, you can drop that monster right out of your hand during your opponent's turn. And if that monster has any nasty on-summon effects, it can cause a lot of trouble for your opponent. But while any ritual deck can technically use this card, it works perfectly with us. Shinobirrds' Mass Monster Bounce and Shinobirroness's Mass Back Row Spin are devastating when summoned through Stars Align already, and Baroness cheesing a Mono Awato out of your deck afterwards makes for the kind of one-sided comedy that you simply can't replicate anywhere else. And all of our new support lays the groundwork for this play perfectly. Shinobirron Shade adds Shinobirds Calling and one of our level 8s to our hand. Baroness Shade gets you Stars Align above the shrine, which will set this card from your deck when she returns to hand. Then, during your opponent's draw phase, you flip this card over to grab your other level 8, and with that, you're all set to blow away whichever half of your opponent's board is a threat to you. And you'll probably even get back Shinobirron Shade during your next turn if you banish it off the effect of Shinobirds Calling. The fact that we also don't always have to sacrifice one of our level 8s to summon the other anymore is a great relief as is. Nobody wants to break up a happy couple after all, but I want to end this part off with one more flavor tidbit. All 3 of the new Shinobird cards were first revealed on July 7th of last year, which doesn't really mean much to many of us Westerners, but that just so happens to be the date of the Japanese holiday that this entire archetype is based on, Tanabata. So basically, Shinobirron and Baroness finally got to see each other once again, and we got these new cards to celebrate it. It's just so wholesome! Sky Striker. Wow, they sure have been getting a lot out of the manga, haven't they? Look, I don't know anything about translation, so I'm not going to say it's easy to do it, but god do I want an official translation so badly! Especially with that new Magistus version of the OCG stories on the horizon. Pillar of the Future Cyanos is a level 1 light machine monster with 500 attack and 1500 defense, and is always treated as a Sky Striker card. You can discard a spell card to special summon this card from your hand, and if this card is normal or special summoned, you can special summon a Sky Striker Ace Rose from your deck or grave. Also, you can't special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of the turn except machine monsters. You can also banish this card from your grave to take one of your Sky Striker Ace Roses that are banished or is in your grave, and either add it to your hand or special summon it. This little bot is one of the evil enemy robots, until they aren't anymore, defecting to the good side along with Rose. The on-summon effect is a great way to turbo out Rose, which you paradoxically need for your most powerful plays in this deck, but want to run as few as possible. But to keep your striker spells active, you are going to have to go into a Link 2 after this, though we do have quite a few good ones to access, even if we are machine locked out of the extra deck. But I'm going to hazard a guess and say that we're only going to use that as a last resort, much preferring to pitch this out of your hand for cost, then use the grave effect that doesn't extra lock us to get Rose. Though sometimes you will want to add Rose back to your hand to take advantage of their negation effect. On top of being a nifty discard outlet for spells, I can see this being a useful part of future combos. Combination Maneuver Engage 0 is a Link 2 light machine monster with 1500 attack, requiring any 2 light and or dark monsters as material, and is always treated as a Sky Striker Ace card. It can't be used as Link material, and if this card is special summoned, you can target a monster on the field with 2500 or more attack and negate its effects until the end of the turn. At the start of the damage step, if this card attacks and you have both Sky Striker Ace Ray and Sky Striker Ace Rose in your grave, you can destroy all monsters your opponent controls. Yowza, that's one heck of a payoff. It is strange that it's so generic since that last effect is only going to be useful in Strikers proper, but it is a negate for a big monster that lives in your extra deck, so I guess there is some utility there. Just make sure to remember you can't use this as Link material itself. Lord knows I'd forget that. But on theme, yeah, this could present a real threat against an entrenched opponent, and with support from cards like Eagle Booster, it's not unreasonable to expect you can force this board wipe through. But that shouldn't come as a shock. We've been seeing the destructive power of Yuri for years now. This is like women loving women limit break number 4 at this point. Sky Striker Ace Camellia is a Link 2 Dark Machine monster with 1500 attack, requiring 2 effect monsters as material. It must first be Link summoned, and you can only special summon copies of this card once per turn. Also once per turn, if you have 3 or less spell cards in your grave, you can send a Sky Striker card from your deck to the grave, and if this card is sent to the grave, you can target one monster your opponent controls to special summon this card to their field, and if you do, send that monster to the grave. Also shift control of this card to its owner during the end phase of this turn. Camellia is another antagonist that works with Azalea to defeat Karma, the faction that Ray works with. As for the effect, it's kind of a kaiju, even though we already have one in hand. But the advantage of this one is that it lives in your extra deck. But don't think you can just drop this as needed because of a hidden-ish quirk of Striker links. See, the aces can only be special summoned once per turn, as a concession to the fact that you can tag between them. So with this restriction, it keeps you from infinitely cycling through your aces, emptying out your extra deck and filling up your grave with random material. But because it limits special summons, not just link summons, you can't just bring this from the extra deck, link it off for another special summon that turn, then use that effect in grave to send away an opponent's monster, because you've already special summoned it this turn. As for its first effect, it's a pretty good one to link climb through. It effectively handles the job of Hayate during the early game without having to burn your battle phase. And then, on any following turns, it's just free removal. But be careful, because in a subtle nod to Camellia's antagonistic role, by gaining control of it during the end phase, it is now in your main monster zone, shutting off all of your on-theme spell and trap cards. Which is another reason why they need to localize this manga! How are you gonna make an effect so flavorful, but give no one a chance to understand why? Sky Striker Ace Azalea Temperance is a Link 3 Dark Machine monster with 2500 attack, requiring 2 or more monsters as material, including a Link monster. It must first be Link summoned, and if special summoned, you can banish a spell from your hand or grave, then target a monster your opponent controls with 2500 or less attack, and equip that face-up monster to this card. And when this card is destroyed by battle, you can special summon one other Sky Striker monster from your hand or grave. Wow, we just really keep getting good utility cards for this theme, huh? Not to mention it's more ways to help clear out our main monster zones. Azalea Temperance is the upgraded version of Sky Striker Azalea, having fashioned some armor from the bodies of the AI overlords she betrayed, while the equip effect is apparently a reference to Azalea using the body of one of Ray's allies as a shield. How gruesome. While this isn't the most powerful option in the Link 3 slot, it does provide a unique way of getting rid of an opponent's monster without destroying them, if that's ever relevant. Expect this to come up every once in a while during deck building as a generic monster you can climb into for various purposes. But with that being said, is anyone else getting Mech Lord vibes here? I'm feeling Mech Lord vibes on this. Surgical Striker Spectra is a Link 4 Dark Machine monster with 3000 attack, requiring 2 or more monsters including a Link monster as material, and is always treated as a Sky Striker Ace monster. It must first be Link summoned, and loses 3000 attack while you have no spell cards in your grave. When your opponent activates a card or effect at Chainlink 2 or higher as a quick effect, you can banish 2 spells from your hand and or grave to negate that effect, then you can destroy a card your opponent controls. This is the final boss of the Sky Striker lore, the combined efforts of Azalea and Camellia's efforts to rule the world. And it's not terrible. We're effectively looking at an Omni Negate for anything at Chainlink 2 or higher, as long as you have 2 spells available to burn on it, and it pops a card your opponent controls for your troubles. Like with a lot of the newer Sky Striker Link monsters, it's not the best in any particular category, but does have some niche usages, so expect to see this crop up in a number of decks to fill some space. On theme, it's another great way to use up cards in our main monster zone, and because it's an ace, you can make this at the end of your turn to give you some kind of negation, then when it rolls back around to your turn, you can link it off into some of your original Link 1 Sky Striker aces to use their effects and get the ball rolling once again. But like with all acronyms, I'm always just left wondering what Spectra stands for. Something pretty eclectic, couldn't tell, radical anyways. Solfachord. Not a lot has progressed for these scaled songstresses since we last followed up on them. In fact, it's Melodious that are now taking the stage. So instead of a real intro diatribe, I'd like to recommend you go check out the old Solfachord video for some musical Nova. It's very fun. Grand Solfachord Coolia is a Link 3 Light Fairy monster with 2700 attack, requiring 2 or more monsters, including a Pendulum monster, as material. It gains 100 attack for each face-up Pendulum monster in your extra deck, and the activated effects of Pendulum monsters that this card points to cannot be negated. Once per turn, when your opponent activates a card or effect as a quick effect, you can special summon a Solfachord card with an odd Pendulum scale from your Pendulum zone to your zone this card points to, negate the activation, then you can add a Solfachord Pendulum monster with an even Pendulum scale from your deck to your face-up extra deck. Okay, that's a lot to take in, especially if you don't know what Solfachord's whole deal is, so let's add a bit of context. The theme cares a lot about not just having big enough scales to perform your Pendulum summons, but also cares about whether the Pendulum scales that you have are even, odd, or both. This Coolia effectively asks you to have an odd scale set up at all times to access the Omni Negate, though not an Omni Destruction, which is a little frustrating. which in turn does the Pendulum Monster equivalent of Foolish Buryling and even-scaled Solfachord, letting you set up for future turns. And because all of our odd-scaled Solfachords have on-summon effects, you'll get a little extra bonus for your troubles. That being said, for Pendulum decks in general, this is fantastic. It's effectively an alternative to Exceed the Pendulum, and while Kulia doesn't offer the same kind of explosive aggression, it's irreplaceable in one specific regard. Zark decks. When summoning the Supreme King using cards like Soul of the Supreme King or Soul of the Supreme Celestial King, its effects will be negated, but summon it under an active Kulia, who keeps your Pendulum monsters it points to from having their effects negated, and you get all the value from it. Combine all that with a little attack boost that's enough to make this a potent threat in battle, and 3 downward pointing arrows that make your Pendulum summons even better, and you've got the makings of a particularly brutal enabler for Pendulum decks, especially if protecting their effects from negation becomes paramount. The only thing left to do is, because of our musical inclinations, is figuring out what Zark's villain song is gonna be. Solfachord Symphony is a quick play spell card that applies the following effects in sequence based on the number of face-up Solfachord Pendulum monsters with different names in your extra deck. With 3 or more Solfachord Pendulum monsters you control gain attack equal to their Pendulum scales times 300 this turn. With 5 or more you can destroy a card your opponent controls, then if you have an odd Pendulum scale in your Pendulum zone, draw a card. And with 7 or more you can special summon a Grand Solfachord monster from your extra deck. It's nice to have a card that's got a little boost at the beginning and gets stronger as things go on. Once you get to 5, it's basically a +1 that makes your monsters very big, and getting a free Grand Solfachord, those are our Link monsters by the by, is ridiculous value. My only issue is that Pendulums lack a good tool to fill up their face-up extra deck, or at the very least, generic ways to do so, and Solfachords themselves aren't exactly overclocked in that regard as much as I would like, so it's not handling that half of the deck particularly well. Design-wise, I do still like its growing power level, but as someone who wants the most for the theme, 7 being the threshold for full power feels a little underwhelming compared to everything else in the game. It certainly evokes the idea of all the Solfachords playing in harmony to raise each other up, slowly growing their ranks over the course of the duel, crescendoing in a grand performance. But concert tickets are really expensive nowadays, so let me know when they make a Pendulum archetype revolving around, I don't know, Netflix or something. Suship. I'm still convinced that this archetype came about because a poor designer ended up skipping lunch that day. But no matter how they cooked this up, Suships really know how to handle flavor. And with this new card, they're really going all out. Gunkan Suship Catch of the Day is a continuous spell that, once per turn, lets you reveal a copy of Gunkan Suship Shari in your hand. Place a counter on this card, and if you do, reveal a Guncanic Seas monster from your extra deck. Your opponent declares a Gunkan monster's card name other than Shari, which is mentioned on a Guncanic Seas monster, then you can add a copy of the declared card to your hand. And if you can't add a card, you shuffle this card into the deck. And if this card is destroyed by your opponent's card, your opponent pays 500 life points for each counter on this card. When it comes to search spells, this one is strange. You may think of it as bad, since what you get does ultimately come down to your opponent. Heck, if they figure out that you're all out of a certain Suship, they can call that one, resulting in you getting nothing. Or, if they know how Suships work, they can even force you into suboptimal options so it's easier to deal with your board. But this is Suships we're talking about here. It's not very likely that your opponent will know the deck enough and will just go along with the card you mentioned on the monster you show them. Now, you may panic and ask yourself, well, can't they just force you to always fail to find by declaring the name of a Sushipic Seas monster, since all of them list themselves by name in their hard once per turn clauses? Don't worry, that's not the case, because your opponent has to declare the name of a card that it's possible to find out of your main deck, which effectively means we've taken the funniest fail to find condition in the game away from aliens in the form of crop circles. But for flavor alone, this card is absolutely spot on, because it literally plays as though you're running a sushi restaurant. Like, you recommend a particular dish by showing them the monster from your extra deck, they make the order, you fetch the ingredients, and prepare what they ordered with your Xyz plays. If you can't find the ingredients, you've got to close up shop, and if it gets destroyed, your opponent has to pay the bill that they've been growing over the course of the turns with that forced life point loss. While it does leave a lot to be desired as a searcher, be real with me, you're not playing Suships to be competitive. Catch of the Day is probably the first instance of a card that combines game mechanics with straight up role playing. Truly, this card is a real catch. Synchron. that's a bit of a misleading title. It's really more about Yusei focused cards, and even then that's a bit of a stretch. Some of these could be construed as signer dragon cards in general instead of belonging to a particular character, but since everyone basically rallies behind Yusei whenever they team up, we're just gonna throw them all here. Junk Mail is a level 1 Earth Warrior Tuner monster with 400 attack and 100 defense, and a Synchro monster that uses this card as material can't be destroyed by battle. If this card is in your grave and you control a Synchro monster with Warrior, Synchron, or Stardust in its original name, except during the turn this card was sent to the grave, you can special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. So it gives the monster that uses it for a summon battle destruction protection, you know, Junk Mail, like Play It Mail, very funny, and is a free level 1 tuner on a later turn for Synchro climbing. This is a goofy little goober, though the lack of a mobility effect, you know, any way to get it onto the board with as little hassle as possible, as well as a delay on that grave effect makes it a suboptimal choice. Which is a shame because I love Synchro material that gives a little bonus to the Synchro monster it's being used for. I guess Yusei got hit by the ZING bug too, but who can blame him? That fame rocks! Sorry buddy, but you're going in the recycling bin. Maybe be a bit more careful about your name game next time, huh? Revolution Synchron is a level 3 Earth Machine Tuner monster with 900 attack and 1400 defense, and if you Synchro summon a Power Tool monster or a level 7 or 8 Dragon monster, this card in your hand can be used as material. If you control a level 7 or higher Synchro monster while this card is in your grave, you can send the top card of your deck to the grave, and if you do, special summon this card, also its level becomes 1. And you can only use that effect of this card once per duel. Folks, the hype for this card was unreal in its lead up, and while it hasn't done anything as of yet, I still think we're on the cusp of seeing something truly heinous. The game is laden with good level 4 and 5 monsters, and once they've used up all their effects and you have Revo in hand, you can just trade them out for an appropriate Synchro, not just Signer Dragons. Although, to be fair, Ancient Fairy Dragon is still kind of a bop. And then, as if to evoke the image of Glow-Up Bulb bursting free from the FNL list, you mill one to bring it back from the grave to do a little Synchro climbing after that monster has used all of its effects. And as an Earth machine, it's supremely searchable. So when it gets good, it's gonna get good and annoying. I also hope this means we're making headway on getting chibi versions of all the iconic 5D's dragons. I want baby red Dragon Archfiend! Shining Star Dragon is a level 4 Light Dragon Tuner monster with 0 attack and defense, and during your opponent's main phase, if this card is in your hand, as a quick effect, you can target a Dragon Synchro monster in your grave to special summon this card. Also, if you do, special summon the targeted monster, but its effects are negated, then immediately after this effect resolves, you can Synchro summon a Dragon Synchro monster using this card you control as material. And a Dragon Synchro that's summoned using this card as material can't be destroyed by battle. Wow, even more battle destruction immunity. How nice. The idea here seems to be that you make a really big Dragon Synchro, leaving behind a level 8 Dragon Synchro monster in your grave. Then, on the opponent's turn, you use that level 8 and Shining Star to make Crimson Dragon, where that battle destruction protection is actually relevant because of the, 0 stats. From that point, you can tag it out using the other dragon you made earlier as your reference point. This is actually pretty solid, and I could see a deck like RDA getting a lot of mileage out of this. Triggering Scarred Dragon Archfiend is one thing, but imagine doing it twice. Now that's shooting for the shining stars. Junk Dragonlet is a level 5 Earth Machine monster with 2100 attack and 1800 defense, and if you control a Synchro monster, you can special summon this card from your hand, and you can only special summon them once per turn this way. When your Synchro monster declares an attack, you can banish this card from your grave, and that monster you control gains 800 attack until the end of the turn. So presumably, you summon this next to a Synchro, maybe even a Synchro tuner to use this as non-tuner material, send this to the graveyard to make another Synchro, then this gets to be a little boost in your graveyard to help them out later. I've honestly seen worse. I just kinda wish the monster that helps you make Synchros didn't require you to already have a Synchro to special summon it. Not great, but not terrible either. Though considering all the fantastic options out there to help with Synchro summoning, this still doesn't make it very high on the list. But that's besides the point. This isn't a junk monster, this is clearly an appliancer. Wheel Synchron is a level 5 Light Machine Tuner monster with 800 attack and 1000 defense, and if this card you control is used as Synchro material, you can treat it as a non-tuner. During your main phase, you can, immediately after this effect resolves, normal summon a level 4 or lower monster. Also, you can't special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of the turn, except Synchro monsters. You can also banish this card from your grave, then target a Synchro monster you control to reduce its level by up to 4. Wheelie here is another in a long line of tuners and non-tuners that can be treated as the opposite whenever it suits them. And while I feel like that design kind of cheapens the whole idea of the mechanic, I can't deny the greater flexibility it provides. The main issue is actually getting it onto the board, because for some reason it doesn't come with its own special summon effect, which means it'll almost exclusively be summoned by Junk Speeder. And it actually fills quite an important niche. The only other main deck level 5 Synchron monster is Quick Draw, but it can only ever be used for monsters that specifically need Synchron tuners. Wheelie here doesn't have to worry about that, and because it can be treated as a non-tuner, it makes Speeder's effect even more explosive. And the sooner you use it, the sooner you can apply its grave effect for some level modulation. We also can't forget that it's kind of a mini Ancient Fairy Dragon, getting a level 4 or lower monster out of your hand for the small price of putting you under the same restriction that Junk Speeder was already going to. It may not see a home in every Synchro deck, but if you want to live the Synchron dream, then this card is an automobile include. Crimson Dragon is a level 12 light dragon synchro monster with 0 attack and defense, requiring generic material. This cannot end well. If this card is special summoned, you can add a spell or trap card that mentions Crimson Dragon from your deck to your hand, and as a quick effect, you can target a level 7 or higher synchro monster on the field, except a copy of this card. Return Crimson Dragon to the extra deck, and if you do, special summon a dragon synchro monster from your extra deck with the same level as the targeted monster, and this is treated as a synchro summon. So the search on summon is alright. We'll be getting into all the options you can grab in just a bit. But that's not what you're using this card for. This did not, sadly, usher in the age of the Signer Dragons pile. This was used to abuse one singular monster, Hot Red Dragon Archfiend King Calamity. Because Crimson Dragon's quick effect is unrestricted, and because the summon is treated as a legit synchro summon, as long as you activate this as Chainlink 1, you can target another level 12 synchro on the field to turn this into Calamity, and boom, no card or effect activations on the field for your opponent that turn. It is a huge lingering floodgate and stops most decks right in their tracks. But I mean, there shouldn't be anything too much to worry about. What deck could possibly spit out 2 level 12 synchro monsters quick enough to take advantage of this? At which point we pause for dramatic effect until you realize that Mannadium and Centurion came out around the same time as this, and those decks spit out synchros like I spit out attacks and Armored Core. Unceasingly, unrelentingly, and with no regard for the safety of myself and others. Thematically, I think this is really cool. Finally, the legendary Crimson Dragon has a playable monster card version that isn't some strange Link prize monster, using its effect as the Signer Dragon to turn into any one of them. But in practice, well, stuff like this exists. It's actually mind-boggling and adds to this narrative that Konami R&D are just a bunch of strange little mooks when they ban cards like Artifact Scythe after a million years, but keep stuff like this legal. Like, can you understand now why players crave communication directly from the R&D team on this one, when they limit a bunch of the game's most famous and infamous floodgates, but leave Calamity untouched? And for that matter, why are there 2 monsters with Calamity in their names that lock your opponent out of their stuff? Does this have some kind of special hidden meaning I'm not aware of? Cosmic Quasar Dragon is a level 12 light dragon synchro monster with 4000 attack and defense, requiring a tuner synchro monster and 2 or more non-tuner synchro monsters as material, and must first be synchro summoned with the above materials. Once per turn, you can target face-up cards on the field up to the number of monsters used as synchro material for this card, +1, and negate their effects permanently. And this effect or its activation cannot be negated. And as a quick effect, you can banish this synchro summoned card to special summon a dragon synchro monster from your extra deck that requires 2 or more non-tuner synchro material, which is treated as a synchro summon. So this is nifty. Cosmic Quasar is taking after the tried and true Delta Excel synchro monster formula, but like Crimson Dragon, acts as a wild card that can turn into any of them on the spot. You can essentially take a pit stop at Cosmic Quasar, negate at least 4 monsters, the 3 needed material +1, then tag into any of the Stardust line of Delta Excels, be they Shooting Quasar, Cosmic Blazar, or Cipher. It's not bad, but when you factor in how Shooting Quasar checks the non-tuners used for its attack number, you realize you only have 2 options. Now, I think this is an interesting way to take this strategy, essentially giving you a free extra step for more value. but at time of recording, I'm not necessarily sure that this is required for that strategy. Our payoffs are already pretty good, we just need more consistent ways to pull it off. And using polymerization on shooting Quasar and Cosmic Blazar does not do that. Heck, it's not even the same summoning method for crying out loud, come on! Synchro Rumble is a normal spell card that targets a tuner or level 7 or 8 dragon synchro monster in your grave and special summons it. Also, for the rest of the turn after this card resolves, you can't special summon monsters from the extra deck except synchro monsters. And if any number of level 7 or 8 dragon synchro monsters or Crimson Dragon you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can banish this card from your grave instead. So this boils down to a more restrictive monster reborn with an extra deck lock, whose only upside is that it can be searched by Crimson Dragon and has destruction protection while in the grave. No wonder no one plays the Crimson Dragon support when they splash that thing in. So I know why this exists. You want to have a searchable way to bring back a target for Crimson Dragon to use its effect on. But was it really necessary to tag it with that restriction? Even without it, the decks running Crimson Dragon usually don't even have a Dragon Synchro to revive with it. Maybe this gets teched in the future when the stars align, and honestly I hope so. Not only does anything with the word Rumble in it get 20% more cooler, Red Dragon Archfiend bursting out of a pool of magma is metal as hell! Synchro Overtop is a normal spell card that targets any number of level 7 or 8 dragon synchro monsters in your grave and special summons them in defense position, but their levels become 1 and their effects are negated. Also, you can't special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of the turn except synchro monsters. When a synchro monster you control is destroyed by a battle, you can banish this card from your grave to special summon a Crimson Dragon from your extra deck. This is another support card that feels over-designed and undercooked. Not from a flavor perspective, mind you, this basically translates to the way Yusei summoned shooting Quasar Dragon in his duel against Zone, but in paper Yu-Gi-Oh! You'd already have to have so many properly summoned appropriate synchro monsters in grave first that it's basically only here to make scripted duels look cool, not help you win a real tournament. Even the in-grave effect is meh at best, since battle triggers are just the worst. Though I will admit, you will catch your opponent not paying attention at some point, and you will get a free level 12 synchro, so in that regard, it's pretty neat. But that's about the only praise I can give this, and, like, can we get a good card in this section, please? Harping on cards that replicate some of the anime's coolest moments is really eating at my soul here. Synchro World is a field spell card, and each time a monster is synchro summoned, place 2 signal counters on this card. If this card in its owner's control is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can special summon a Crimson Dragon from your extra deck, and you can remove 4, 7, or 10 signal counters from your field to apply the following effect. Remove 4 to increase or decrease the level of a face-up monster you control by 1, remove 7 to special summon a tuner from your grave, or remove 10 to special summon a synchro monster from your grave. This one, well, I at least like this one better. Signal counters used to be the exclusive domain of Signal Warrior, the original humanoid Yusei Go, but it generated counters very slowly and its effects weren't anything to write home about. On your mark, get set, duel would give us another way to generate signal counters, but was still very passive. Now with Synchro World, we have a way to generate them more actively while we synchro climb, and it has some pretty snazzy effects. If you are a synchro spam strategy, having a way to get back used tuners or synchro monsters means more ways to get material to continue your combos. And if it gets popped, then hey, free Crimson Dragon. It's not game changing, but certainly signals a sea change in the strategy. Scrap Iron Sacred Statue is a normal trap card that targets a level 7 or 8 dragon synchro monster that is either banished or in your grave and special summons it, but returns it to the extra deck during the end phase. Also after that, set this card face down instead of sending it to the grave. If this set card in its owner's control is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can special summon a Crimson Dragon from your extra deck. Damn, they really want you to summon that thing out for free, huh? This is a cool way to pay homage to the old Scrap Iron cards, and reviving an appropriate dragon each turn either gives you a body to block with, use as material, or just plains recycles them for later. I call any duelist running this the Iron Giant, because what you have in your hands is art! And yes, that is my most forced, unfunny reference on this channel. Get me the award. Thank you very much. TG. The allure of Librarian Turbo rears its head once again. possibly with the most potent bunch of support we've seen for the theme yet. Move over, Savage Strike! Age of Overlord is where it's at. TG Rocket Salamander is a level 1 Fire Pyro monster with 600 attack and defense, and you contribute a TG monster to special summon a TG monster from your deck with a different original name than that tributed monster's. If you control a Machine TG monster, you can target a level 4 or lower TG monster in your grave and special summon it in defense position, but its effects are negated. So this acts as our wild card, turning any on-field TG into another, even letting you use itself, accessing your entire theme all at once. The interesting part of this card is the Machine TG requirement for its second effect, which we haven't seen on these cards before. And if you've rooted around the card pool for a bit, you'll know that the machines are almost exclusively hidden in the extra deck, as well as a token you can make with Tank Grub. So does this mean that Rocket Salamander is only good after you've set up your plays? Well, not exactly. We'll get into why this is the way it is in a card coming up. But for now, I'd like to highlight how its type, level, and attribute all line up perfectly with some other support that's making the rounds. The Diabellstar cards! Here's how it works. You're going to play Wanted to search yourself Diabellstar, then summon it by sending one of your cards to the graveyard. On summon, it'll grab you original Sinful Spoil Snake Eyes, which you'll play, sending Diabellstar to grave, summoning Rocket Salamander right out of your deck. Then you can banish Wanted from grave to return the original Sinful Spoils back to your deck to draw a card, replacing the discard that started this whole thing. And it didn't even have to use your normal summon. So you know they made this a level 1 fire specifically to ride those coattails. They even made it a pyro to use with Bonfire, another popular card that you'll see in Snake Eye decks moving forward. So by using this admittedly very appropriate engine, the ease by which you can summon this is fantastic, letting you pair this with another monster, making either of them whichever you need to fulfill your combo. Then, on top of all of that, once you meet that Machine TG requirement, you get a free TG out of your graveyard to use as more material for more plays. This card isn't just gas, it's rocket fuel. TG Mighty Striker is a level 2 Earth Warrior Synchro Tuner monster with 1800 attack and 0 defense, requiring generic material. Once per turn during your opponent's main phase, you can, immediately after this effect resolves, Synchro Summon using this card you control. If this card is Synchro Summoned, you can add a TG Spell or Trap card from your deck to your hand, and if this card is sent from your monster zone to the grave, you can send a TG card from your deck to the grave. So what exactly does this accomplish for us? Well, first we need to actually figure out how we're going to summon this. Level 2 Synchros aren't exactly brimming with options. Well, we did just talk about Rocket Salamander sculpting our field, so we can use it to turn another TG into Tank Grub, netting us a nifty token. Next up, the search. And funnily enough, TG Spell and Trap cards didn't actually exist before this set. Sure, TG without the dots existed, but these are actually name-stamped, so this doesn't add to any of their playability, which is kinda sad, but then you realize that if you searched out TG Spell or Trap cards without the dots, you could grab anything that randomly had those two letters next to each other. Granted, at time of recording, that's not really a widespread problem, but you never know what'll happen in the future. In fact, you can see that right now. If we had that hypothetical kind of search, we'd be able to grab Eat Gaboon. But of those new cards, each one is a certified banger, even including the one that fixes up our little Machine TG problem. As for sending a TG card from deck to grave, we don't have a lot that activates in the grave, but we do have several graveyard recursion effects, so it plays well with those. Add to that an unrestricted quick sync, letting you spring monsters on your opponent out of nowhere, and this strikes me as a very strong inclusion. TG Over Dragonar is a level 5 Dark Dragon Synchro monster with 2100 attack and 1900 defense, requiring generic materials. If this card is Synchro Summoned, you can special summon any number of TG monsters from your grave in defense position. Also, you can't special summon monsters for the rest of the turn except TG monsters. And if this card on the field is destroyed, you draw a card, which I presume is there to keep it in line with other TG Synchros, and it's nice insurance, but really our goal is to fold it into bigger Synchro monsters. TG have required a lot of material to make any of their plays work, leaving them with depleted resources even after they've established their bosses. But Dragonar has your material pulling double duty, acting as a mix of Soul Charge and Junk Speeder to make your Synchro climb smooth as butter. Heck, if you use Mighty Striker as material, you can set up your chains in such a way so Striker sends a TG monster from deck to grave, which Dragonar can summon when it resolves because its effect doesn't target. It's actually pretty cool. What's strange is that this card feels like it should have been part of the theme the whole time, doing exactly the kind of mass material summoning that Delta XL Synchro decks are supposed to be doing, and now it feels right at home. I guess they were waiting for new support, huh? TG Glaive Blaster is a level 12 Earth Machine Synchro monster with 4000 attack and defense, requiring a Tuner Synchro and 2 or more non-Tuner Synchro monsters as material. It must be Synchro summoned, and as a quick effect, you can target a monster on the field, special summon from the extra deck, and banish it. And this effect can be used a number of times per turn, up to the number of non-Tuner Synchros used as material, so at minimum, you get 2 per turn. And once per turn, if any number of monsters are banished face up, except during the damage step, you can target one of them and special summon them to your field, ignoring summoning conditions. So the on-theme reason we have that last effect is to work with our big synchros. Halberd Cannon, for instance, has a great inherent summon negation effect and is a soft once per turn. So what you could do is resolve that, banish your own Halberd Cannon with Glaive, then immediately summon it back with Glaive Blaster's trigger effect, resetting Halberd Cannon to do it all over again. I've also seen this used as part of Calamity setups, which we're all excited for, where you make Blade Blaster, banish it during your opponent's draw phase by banishing a Mighty Striker from your grave, which will trigger Glaive Blaster to summon the Striker out, with Blade Blaster returning during that next phase. And there you go, you've got 12 levels worth of material, and a level 12 Glaive Blaster. So just quick sync for Crimson Dragon, target that Glaive Blaster, and bing bang boom, you've locked your opponent out of on-field activations. I hope you're happy. But what you can also do with this is steal your opponent's monsters. If they summon something from the extra deck that you like, banish it with Glaive, then put it on your field. What a bargain! But I'm noticing that this monster doesn't have a single firearm on it. How are we supposed to blast this Glaive with no rail cannon to blast the Glaive with? TG Limiter Removal is a normal spell card that has you discarding a card to add 2 TG monsters with different names from your deck to your hand. And you can banish this card from your grave to target a TG monster in your grave and shuffle it into the deck, or add it to your hand instead if you control a machine TG monster. Trust me, we're gonna get to that in just a bit. And you can only use one effect of this card per turn, and only once per turn. This is, out of the gate, just a fantastic bit of hand fixing, getting you any 2-card combo you could want in theme, even if it does lose a little hard to Ash. The Grave effect is only really good once you've established a machine TG, but it is good, getting you back cards like Screw Serpent to extend into the sun. And grabbing this off of Mighty Striker is pretty keen too. But where's the attack boost? I was told Limiter Removal had an attack boost. What's happening here? TG All Clear is a continuous spell card that, wait for it, makes all TG monsters on the field become machine monsters. An effect that references the anime where, there, all TGs are machines in addition to their other types, because, you know, future. During your main phase, you can normal summon a TG monster in addition to your normal summon or set, and during your main phase, you can destroy a TG monster in your hand or on your field, and if you do, add a TG monster with a different name from your deck or grave to your hand. Oh, now this is another really good card to grab off of Striker. It's an extra normal summon, changes out your TGs for another, even grabbing from the grave, and most importantly, enables all your additional effects even before you establish a monster like Glaive Blaster. This is a fantastic overall card that does a lot to raise up the thing's playability, taking muddled play lines and making them all clear. TG Close is a counter trap card, and when a spell card, trap card, or monster effect is activated while you control a machine TG monster, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. And if a synchro monster is banished while this card is in your grave, you can set this card from your grave to your field, but banish it when it leaves the field. But you can only use one effect of this card per turn, and only once per turn. This is another pretty good card you can add off of Mighty Striker, but the twist is that it's actually better to send this to the grave with Striker. Once you've got it in there, we can banish one of our synchros with Glaive Blaster to put this card back on our field. And now we have an Omni Negate to insulate our board or choke out our opponent's plays. The rest of our theme does a great job of setting us up, but it's the trap card that's the real closer. Time Thief. This section is another one made possible by last year's big reprint tin. Time Thief has never been in a place where you could play it pure with consistent power, but do our new additions do anything to change that? Time Thief Power Reserve is a continuous trap card that, when activated, special summons itself as a normal monster, which is a level 4 Dark Psychic monster with 1900 attack and 2500 defense that's also still treated as a trap card. Then you can special summon a Machine Time Thief monster from your hand, deck, or grave. If you control any number of Xyz monsters that have both a spell card and a trap card as material, you can banish this card from your grave to banish a card on the field. This is powerful, but still way too slow. Obviously, using a trap card as material to make Redoer is very good, giving it that strong removal, but I don't think people would care to run, say, Phantom Nightshade Brigandine if you couldn't activate it the turn it was set. Power Reserve needed something similar. While it's cool that it grabs you that additional material to make that rank 4, Bezelship being the best since Regulator doesn't work if you control another monster, that one turn delay really does mess with things. The Engrave effect is cute and plays well with a lot of our support that puts non-monster cards under our Xyz, but is still a bit too much setup to make the payoff worthwhile. Sucks to say, I really love this theme, but they probably really should have kept this one in reserve. Transcendosaurus. I know the first names we knew him by were fan translations, but damn do I like Transcendrakes way better. The idea of taking old vanilla dinos and giving them a fresh coat of paint is such a cool design idea, and with Fusion Dino support coming out in Mizmi, we might just see a resurgence of these, though our latest member does kind of break that trend. Transcendosaurus Exoraptor is a Link 3 Dark Dinosaur monster with 3000 attack, requiring 2 or more dinosaur monsters, including a level 6 or higher monster. If this card is special summoned, you can special summon a dinosaur monster from your hand, and if a face-up dinosaur monster this card points to is destroyed by a battle or is sent to the grave, you can draw a card. If this card is destroyed, you can shuffle a normal monster from your grave into the deck, then you can special summon this card. So it's got the usual Transcendosaurus effect to revive itself by shuffling back a normal monster, and it helps get those big dinos out of your hand, and is a draw engine. As a Link monster, it's pretty easy to get a hold of, with Reproducus giving you some interesting ways to make things dinos along the way. But it breaks the cycle! It's not based on any level 6 normal dino. You had 2 really good picks and you passed over both of them? Where's my Sword Arm of Dragon retrain, Konami? I want the goofy numbers! Trap Hole. Technically, these got folded into Trap Tricks Explained, because, you know. But that means we're gonna have to take a moment to cover this strange new card. Banishing Trap Hole is a normal trap card that you can activate when your opponent summons any number of monsters with 1500 or less attack to banish those monsters with 1500 or less attack face down. So against decks that like to summon out a bunch of tiny monsters, especially Pendulum decks, you can use this to get rid of them for about as permanently as it gets. Doesn't work against anything else, but the selection of trap holes you use has always been dictated by the format, so having another one gives you more options, which is pretty sweet. The thing is though, we already have a Banishing Trap Hole, but bottomless. Banishing is the whole reason that card is good. Unchained. This is another control deck that I really vibe with, and wow did they get everything they could ever want. Turns out all it takes is a few cards with the right traits to make a deck really sing. Until the ban list happens, that is. Unchained Soul of Sharvara is a level 6 Fire Fiend monster with 2000 attack and 1500 defense, and during the main phase, if this card is in your hand as a quick effect, you can target a Fiend monster or face down card you control, destroy it, and if you do, special summon this card. But while it's face up in the monster zone, you can't special summon monsters except Fiend monsters. If this card is sent to the grave, you can set an Unchained spell or trap card directly from your deck. So, distilling it down, it's a quick effect enabler that pops your set back row, which summons other Unchained out of your deck, and when it goes to the grave, you get a new one of those, representing effects from revival to removal. Also, being level 6 gives you access to DDD Wave King High Caesar, so now you have access to summon negation. Oh, and it's an Unchained Soul for the purposes of making our Link monster, something we didn't have a lot of cards to help with on that. And that's probably why the card is currently at 1, because it does everything. It's also probably limited for our safety. That dog's got the Chidori charged up and ready to go, and I don't want to be on the other side of it when it goes off. Unchained Soul of Shyama is a level 6 Water Fiend monster with 2000 attack and 1500 defense, and you can target a card you control, destroy it, then you can destroy a spell or trap card on the field. And if this card is in your grave, you can target a Fiend monster or face down card you control, destroy it, and if you do, special summon this card, but place it on the bottom of the deck when it leaves the field. So where Charvara wants to be summoned from hand before going to the grave, Shayama wants to go directly to the grave to jump back out of it before going to the deck. By popping any of our on-theme cards, we're gonna get to float into an additional Unchained, which means more board presence for us, and is even more removal once it's on the board, letting us pop anything to pop a back row, acting as either a way to get rid of an opponent's back row you don't want to deal with anymore, or blow up another one of your Unchained spell or traps to keep the cards flowing. This is a very powerful enabler and a card-eating machine, and it's not Shy-ama about it. Unchained Soul Lord of Yama is a Link 2 Dark Fiend monster with 2000 attack, requiring 2 Fiend monsters as material. If this card is special summoned, you can add an Unchained monster from your deck or grave to your hand, and if any number of cards you control are destroyed by battle or card effect while this card is in your grave, you can banish this card to special summon a Fiend monster from your hand or grave, then you can destroy a card you control. So at any point when you've got 2 Fiends together, you can convert them into a Yama, get one of your on-theme monsters back, maybe a little Charvara, then link this into any of your Unchained Soul Link monsters for later. Then, if any of your cards get popped, you get a free Fiend and maybe enable one of your on-destruction effects. As far as link climbing goes, this is a pretty fantastic rung, getting your pieces in all the right places before moving on to your end board. And that's just from someone who has cursory knowledge of the archetype. I'm sure experts could yammer on about it for ages. Ursarctic. As I promised in part 1, it's been a fantastic year for Ancient Guardians fans, but it could be argued that Ursarctic has had the biggest glow up out of all of those themes. Not only were they horrendously inefficient in card advantage, much of their legacy support requires you to play Drytron, a much more successful deck that nonetheless has absolutely zero synergy with Ursarctics. It turns out the deck that prides itself on running low-level monsters doesn't play well with a deck with a bunch of high-level monsters. Who would have guessed? Anyway, before I get too bent out of shape over this, let's kick off with the continuation to this nonsensical crossover. Ultimate Bright Knight Ursatron Alpha is a level 7 water machine monster with 2000 attack and 700 defense, and it's always treated as both an Ursarctic and a Drytron card. It can't be normal summoned or set, and must instead be special summoned by a card effect. If you control an Ursarctic or Drytron monster other than another copy of this card, you can special summon this card from your hand, then you can add an Ursarctic or Drytron spell or trap card from your deck to your hand. Because this is playable across 2 archetypes, we'll explain this card's capabilities in both of them separately, starting with Drytron. And while Drytron weren't exactly wanting for more searchers for their back row, Fafnir does a great job of that already, there's nothing wrong with a little redundancy. Heck, if you end up with both this and Fafnir in your hand, you can actually make use of some of the lesser used Drytron back row. You've got Meteor Shower to keep your opponent off of inherent summons, Asterism for extra disruption, or even Ursarctic Drytron, which will get you into ultimate flagship Ursatron, and that can provide some excellent utility, as well as let you make a rank 7 with Ursatron Alpha. One of the wackier ones in particular being Mermail Abyss Gaios, a quick effect board wipe monster negate for anything smaller than it. But be careful, the back row search on Ursatron Alpha is tied to its summon from hand effect, so if you summon this off of Drytron Nova, you won't get the search. However, if you use it as ritual material for Draconids or Quadrantids, its high level will actually lock you out of their respective multi-attacking and Harpy's Feather Duster effects, since those require you to use all low-leveled monsters. It's not ideal, but you can still use this as fodder for Benton or Natasha, so you'll be fine. As for Ursatron Alpha's capabilities in Ursarctic, well, I'm gonna hand things over to our resident Ursarctic expert for the rest of this section. Lord knows I'm not touching any of this. All yours, Pillock.
Whoa, I certainly wasn't expecting to be in the recording booth today, but hey, if it means I get to gush about Space Bears, I'm down. As for Ursatron Alpha's capabilities in Ursarctic, man, this card alone solves a whole slew of problems. The single biggest issue with Ursarctic before this card was that, despite the monsters all being summonable at quick effect speed, the early game was tremendously inefficient on your resources thanks to all of the hand rerouting, so much so that making even one boss monster sucked you dry. Result, a single Kaiju, Lightning Storm, or Nibiru was basically game over. And this has made the infamous archetypal draw 7 card, Ursarctic Radiation, the deck's be-all or end-all. Here's the rub though. Up until now, Ursarctic didn't have a back row searcher other than Septentrion, and that search is triggered by your opponent's special summoning. And by the time you've made Septentrion, Radiation isn't likely to be doing anything for you anymore. So the game plan was to hope and pray that you'd see Radiation in your opening hand, along with a couple of monsters, to get the necessary mileage out of it. Ursatron Alpha fixes this critical issue with minimal fuss, as you can search it out with Bipolar or Departure, throw it down next to another Ursarctic, preferably a level 8, Grab a copy of Radiation, and you're off to the races. But there's more than Radiation to search with this. Departure for hand sculpting, Slider for extension, Quint Charge for resource recovery and springing Septentrion or Grand Chariot on your opponent mid-combo, and of course, Ursarctic Drytron or Drytron Fafnir for deploying the party boat. And even if you have no need for a back row search, Ursartron Alpha being a level 7 also makes it a valid fodder to summon an Ursarctic. I don't know how bears socialize, but this one's definitely the alpha, even if it's not a bear. Ursarctic Polar Star is a level 1 water machine synchro monster with 700 attack and 2000 defense, and just like its predecessors, it cannot be synchro summoned. Instead, you use the same procedure as usual for an Ursarctic summon, sending a non-tuner and a tuner with a level difference of 1 from your field to the grave to special summon it from your extra deck, and its effect lets you tribute a level 8 Ursarctic monster from your hand or field along with itself to special summon a level 7 Ursarctic synchro monster from your extra deck, ignoring the summoning conditions. And if you do, that monster gains an additional effect, keeping your opponent from activating the effects of any monsters with levels that were summoned from the extra deck. Yikes, what did they do to Polari to make him this feral? Septentrion's Floodgate effect more often than not spells instant death for any Xyz or Link-focused strategy if they can't find an out. On the other hand, Fusion and Synchro-based decks just brush it right off. But summon Septentrion off of Polar Star's effect, and even those decks are susceptible to the Deep Freeze. Heck, even if you summon Grand Chariot with this effect, it'll still leave them in serious trouble. It's not a complete skill drain on their effects like Septentrion, meaning that the passive effects of Fusion and Synchro still work. And you can't see this right now, but I am glaring at Dynamorphia Rexterm at the moment. But that's fine. Mystic Mine is banned for a reason after all, but believe it or not, it gets funnier. Notice how Polar Star's effect lacks any kind of once per turn clause, and because the effect tributes monsters, Big Dipper, Departure, and Ursarctic Drytron can all be used to waive the entire cost, meaning that you can cheese out 2 boss monsters with 1 Polar Star. The first one by using a cost replacement effect, then the second by paying that cost properly. Possibly even more times if you have access to any more cost replacements. Now, not many people have taken kindly to this card in my experience. Nothing good ever comes of one-sided floodgates after all, but there's still a crack in its armor. Since Polar Star doesn't provide the monster with any effect protection, it's not too big of an ask for your opponent to just clear the level 7 you summon with a main deck monster effect or a back row. And I'm honestly kind of glad for that, because let's be real here, that would be beyond unfair. I'd rather not leave us on a low note, so to wrap up here, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Did you know that if you pair this up with Righty Driver, it's entirely possible to make Cosmic Blazar Dragon? It may seem like I'm absolutely unhinged, and you'd be right, but just hibernate on it. You'll figure it out.
Utopia. Kinda. More like Utopic. Japan's quarter-century duelist box released a lot of crossover cards, and this one embodies a very early tag duel in Zexal, where Yuma borrows Shark's Black Ray Lancer and Armored Xyz cards, using them to combine with Utopia for a game-winning attack. And then the two of them were best friends forever, and nothing bad ever happened. Full Armored Utopic Ray Lancer is a rank 4 Water Beast Warrior Xyz monster with 2500 attack and 600 defense, requiring 3 level 4 monsters as material. But once per turn, you can also Xyz summon copies of this card by discarding any spell or trap card using a rank 4 or lower Xyz monster you control as material, transferring over all of its material to it. Monsters your opponent controls lose 500 attack, and once per battle phase at the start of the battle phase, you can negate the effects of all attack position monsters your opponent currently controls. And when this attacking card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can detach a material from this card so it can make a second attack in a row. Okay, so am I the only one that thinks we're going to be seeing a lot of this when it comes out? If your deck is already on smaller Xyz monsters, trading a spell or trap in hand to act as a rank up magic to turn any of your monsters into a big beatstick with effect negation is pretty big. Granted, it only works once you get to the battle phase and only works on attack position monsters, but that covers a lot of threats. And on top of all that, it's a conditional double attacker for crying out loud. Seriously, keep an eye out for this when it hits circulation, because you can bet that the competition is going to take full advantage of it. Vanquish Soul. Born to be a fighting game, forced to participate in Master Duel. Easily Wild Survivor's coolest archetype, this theme has had its ups and downs, but I couldn't be more happy for them, especially now that they've gotten some new DLC to work with. Vanquish Soul Jiaolong is a level 5 fire worm monster with 2400 attack and 2100 defense, and if you reveal any number of cards in your hand to activate a Vanquish Soul card or effect, except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your hand. And once per turn, you can activate one of these effects by revealing monsters in your hand with the listed attributes. reveal a fire to change the battle position of a monster on the field, or reveal 2 fires to add any Vanquish Soul card from your deck to your hand, except a copy of this card. Each of these 2 effects can only be used once per turn, and cannot be used on the same chain. This is a huge blessing for the theme, taking your spare Rawzens and Ash Blossoms and turning them into value. And not like heavy Borger where you get a random draw, I'm talking about real, targeted searching to set up your plays. And because it's a quick effect, you can use this during your opponent's turn to get double the searches. Its special summon effect is also comically easy to fulfill. Heck, you can search this off of Rawzen, then reveal Jiaolong for Rawzen's fire effect just to get it out of your hand. It's that easy. The battle position changing effect also shouldn't be underestimated, especially in simplified game states. The ability to deny your opponent the chance to launch an offensive can get you just the right opportunity you need to grab the game. Though, I have to ask, if the different attributes are supposed to be different button inputs, does that mean that Jiaolong is a big button masher? Vanquish Soul Snow Devil is a normal trap card that has you revealing up to 1 each of a dark, earth, and fire monster in your hand, then you apply the following effects in sequence based on the number of cards revealed. With 1 or more, burn your opponent for 400 damage, then you can special summon a Vanquish Soul monster from your hand. Reveal 2 or more to burn your opponent for 600 more damage, and keep all your Vanquish Soul monsters you control from being destroyed by card effects this turn. And with 3, burn your opponent for 800 more damage, then destroy all monsters on the field. Wow, that can be brutal. This is another card that has a scaling power level, depending on how far you've advanced your game state. But with the right hand, you can get the maximum value out of this right out of the gate. And if you don't have the perfect hand, you've got Rawzen, Jiaolong, and Borger to fill your hand up with cards. Snow Devil mobilizes your monsters, keeps them safe, and is basically a one-sided board wipe, all while doing more damage to stack on top of Borgers. This is a truly heinous card, really showing that the devs don't really care about game balance if it means pushing more downloads. Dust Devil is just completely outclassed by this. Vaylantz. Despite being the namesake theme of Tactical Masters, Vaylantz are definitely the underdogs of that set thanks to its steep learning curve, and, you know, being a Pendulum deck right before the beginning of Cash format, and soon to be Snake Eye format, because Flamber's Dragon takes no prisoners. And sadly, we haven't received a lot of new units to help us out. Perhaps there's been some production delays. Vaylantz Wave Master Phase is a continuous trap card that, once per turn, when a monster moves from one monster zone to another monster zone, activates one of the following effects. You either give all level 5 or higher Vaylantz monsters you control a 1200 attack boost until the end phase, or you can send this face-up card from the spell and trap zone to the graveyard to target an effect monster in your opponent's main monster zone, and place it in the spell and trap zone in its same column as a continuous spell. And if there's already a card in that spell and trap zone, destroy it. So there's a lot to like here. When it comes to our main deck monsters, our battle stats aren't exactly anything to write home about, but trigger this, and all our high-level units are gonna get swole, contesting most boss monsters when they do so. And this effect also makes our fusions terrifying. For example, Grand Duke spikes up to 3700 attack, meaning it basically demands a removal effect, and that's assuming you didn't use its on-summon effect to make it even bigger. Notably, this is also a soft once per turn, so if you have multiple copies of Master Phase active, your opponent is almost certainly not surviving your final charge. Master Phase also gives us another outlet for kicking our opponent's monsters into the back row besides Mamanaka and König-Weizen, and it even yeets itself off the field to do so, opening up your back row to place your Vaylantz monsters in with the moving effects of Baron, as well as the stationary effect of Viscount. But this card isn't without its flaws. Ideally, we'd like to be triggering the removal effect during our opponent's turn as a disruption tool. However, the only on-theme way to do that right now during our opponent's turn is Arctis 12. Granted, Arctis isn't exactly difficult to summon, but it's still a less flexible condition to fulfill than we'd like. And even if you do succeed in shoving your opponent's monsters into the back row, remember that the field spells are reciprocal, so nothing's stopping them from using Shinra Bansho to get that monster right back. So you're either going to want to get rid of one of your field spells before using the removal effect, or wait until the battle phase, neither of which are ideal. But the real nail in the coffin for this card's usability at time of recording is that because it's a trap card, it's not searchable. At first you may think that Shinonome can do it, but sadly, she only searches spell cards. So currently, the only way to get Master Phase into your hand is to hope you peel it off the top of your deck with Marquis, but if you're doing that, adding a trap card is going to be the last thing on your mind. This card isn't bad, far from it, but until we get some more support to enable it properly, it's hard to recommend. Though if last year's valuable book EX is anything to go off of, we're due for another expansion any day now. So we better get to work on mastering it before the support phases out. Volcanics. Praise be to the painful one! Pyros sure are having their time in the sun this year, and as was predicted, the Fire Duelist set came with new Volcanic cards. Let's take a look and see how spicy they are. Volcanic Rimfire is a level 1 Fire Pyro monster with 300 attack and 0 defense, and if this card is sent to the grave, you can activate one of these effects, but you can only use each effect once per turn. Either banish this card from your grave, and if you do, send a Volcanic monster from your deck to the graveyard except a copy of this card, or banish a Blaze Accelerator card from your face-up field or grave to place a Blaze Accelerator continuous spell or trap card from your hand or deck face-up on your field. While it takes visual inspiration from Volcanic Shell, this card gets you advantage in a bit of a different way, either as a Foolish Burial for any Volcanic, or getting a Blaze Accelerator active if you have one in rotation anyway. It even gets Blaze Accelerator Reload set up immediately so you can start churning through cards for draws. It's a pretty sweet card to help get cards into position, but I've got to question their dedication to the cause. As Volcanics, we don't want to half-ass any of it. Don't just set fire to the rim, get the whole darn thing! Volcanic Trooper is a level 3 Fire Pyro monster with 1000 attack and defense, and if this card is normal or special summoned, you can add a Volcanic card from your deck to your hand except a copy of this card. You can also discard a card to special summon a Bomb token to your opponent's field, which is a level 1 Fire Pyro monster with 1000 attack and defense. Seems bad to give our opponent material, but when one is destroyed, its controller takes 500 damage, so really, it's just another opportunity to get in for some free damage, as well as disrupting any cards that require our opponent to have an empty board to work. Just the fact that it's a Stratos is already fantastic, but also being a discard outlet with some funky utility is just icing on the cake. Well, maybe not ice, but some other fire-based substitute for icing. Trooper is the flambe on the baked Alaska. There we go. Volcanic Emperor is a level 8 Fire Pyro monster with 3100 attack and 2400 defense that can't be normal summoned or set. It must be special summoned from the hand or grave by banishing either 3 Pyro monsters or 1 Blaze Accelerator card from your face-up field and or grave, and you can only special summon copies of this card once per turn. When summoned this way, you can burn your opponent for 500 damage for each banished Pyro monster, then you can set a Volcanic Trap card directly from your deck. Also, each time your opponent special summons any number of monsters, burn them for 500 damage. Now this is a boss monster. It goes hard right from the word go. 3100 is a monstrous attack stat, so it's already running over the competition, but it's also dealing huge chunks of burn damage when it touches down. If you go the Pyro Banishing route, this is 1500 damage right to the dome, and you get a free card for your troubles. And then your opponent gets another tick of damage whenever they try to build up their board to retaliate against you. And if they do manage to get rid of this, it can come back from the graveyard by banishing 3 more Pyros, and when it comes to that burning effect, it'll check the 3 you banished previously, so you'll be doing 3000 damage. I cannot stress just how much of a game changer it is for the theme to have an honest-to-goodness boss monster to rally behind. This basically takes Doomfire out of contention entirely, but if it's any consolation, their upgraded form really rules. Fire Ejection is a normal spell card that sends a Pyro monster from your deck to the grave. Then if you send a Volcanic monster to the grave, you can apply one of these effects. Either burn your opponent for damage equal to the sent monster's level times 100, or special summon a Bomb token to your opponent's field, which is the same as the one made by Trooper, down to the fact that it burns your opponent if it's destroyed for 500 damage. So this is like the Dragon Shrine of Pyro monsters, right? You can technically use anything of the type, a pool that has been swiftly growing over the past 12 months, but we get a little extra bonus if we send an on-theme monster. And with targets like Shell, Rimfire, Scattershot, and Emperor, you aren't lacking for good options. But as far as firing targets go, Burstinatrix was a bad choice. Don't you all know that fire attacks do half damage against fire monsters? You've got to start memorizing your typing charts, people! Volcanic Blaze Accelerator is a continuous spell card that you can activate by sending a Blaze Accelerator from your hand, deck, or face-up field to the grave, and you can only control a single copy of this card. Once per turn, during your main phase, you can special summon a Volcanic monster from your hand. And once per turn, you can target a face-up monster your opponent controls to send a level 1 Pyro monster from your deck to the grave, and if you do, destroy that monster. This is a huge improvement over our older models of Blaze Accelerators, not you Reload You're Perfect. My only issue is that if you want to play this, you have to run the original Blaze Accelerator to actually make this work. Otherwise, you'll have to cheat it into play with Rimfire. But I actually think it's worth the deck space. Not only because you get a free Volcanic summon out of your hand and removal while setting up your shells and Rimfires, sending that Blaze Accelerator to grave gets you material for Rimfire's effect, or it can be used for a cheaper summon of Emperor. And because it's actually name-stamped as a Volcanic card, you can grab this off of Trooper, so it's never far out of reach. And, for maximum flavor, the cannon is even shaped like Axel Brody's Dual Disc, which is amazing. Now, this does make us confront the fact that Axel is shooting living lava creatures out of that gun, which sounds inhumane, but honestly, look at them, they love it. Being launched out of a rail cannon at Mach 5 is like when your cat gets the zoomies, it's just something they do. Volcanic Emission is a normal trap card that lets you activate one of two effects. Either take a Volcanic monster from your deck and either add it to your hand or special summon it, ignoring summoning conditions, but return it to the hand during the end phase. Or target a Pyro monster on the field to burn your opponent for damage equal to that monster's original attack, or if you targeted a monster you control, the damage is halved. So that second effect is pretty nifty. You can dunk your opponent for 1,000 by hitting a bomb token you've given them, but we've also got another target that can do an outrageous amount of damage in Volcanic Queen. We can kaiju over an opponent's monster and then clock him for 2,500. It's very funny. And with Pyros getting more and more popular, then who knows, you might just get to freely fire this off in a particular matchup. But even if they don't have a Pyro, you still have the option of hitting them with your own monster, and while having the damage does kinda suck, if their life points are low enough, it doesn't much matter. Speaking of Queen, we can also summon that out onto our field if we need a blocker using the first effect, and if it survives, we get it back into our hand to kaiju them later. Summon a Volcanic Trooper for a search, likewise can be bounced back if it survives for another search, or, in a bit of a twist, summon Volcanic Doomfire. It's very bricky, but you can flip a mission during your opponent's battle phase, applying its little known effect that forces your opponent's monsters to attack into it during that battle phase. Now, the bad news is that if they have a bunch of monsters, we're not likely to force all of them to attack into Volcanic Doomfire, because the good news is once it blows up one in battle, it causes a board wipe for them. This is honestly a fantastic card. It's got a great baseline utility that does allow for some truly silly plays if you're feeling inventive, and I couldn't ask for more out of Legacy support. Though, judging by the name, maybe I would ask for the archetype to be a bit more environmentally friendly. I'm not sure all the pyrotechnics are doing great things for our carbon emissions. Volcanic Inferno is a continuous trap card that, when your opponent activates a monster effect, lets you banish a Pyro monster from your grave. You burn your opponent for 500 damage, then if you banished a Volcanic monster to activate the effect, you can negate that opponent's effect. And during your opponent's end phase, you can target up to 2 of your Volcanic monsters that are banished or are in your grave and place them on the bottom of your deck. So having some negation on hand is pretty cool, especially because you can grab this off of your Emperor summon. It banishes more Pyros, which means more damage for future Emperor summons, and will overall do a good job of keeping your opponent's hands tied. The recycle effect is also pretty neat, but does come with some design tensions. Because you want your banished pile to be as big as possible for maximum burn damage, you don't necessarily want to recycle everything, but we do have some great utility monsters like Scattershot and Rimfire, so having this gives you a chance to recycle those material when you need them. This is overall a very good card for the theme, giving you longevity for the grind game and a way to sideline your opponent's plays, but not in the most dignified of ways. I mean, look at it. The art makes it seem like Emperor saw an effect it didn't like and started throwing a temper tantrum. It's actually kind of funny. Watts. Once again, we've got a big old technically sticker slapped on this section. While not featuring the orthodox Watt monsters in the art, it does have Watt Psychic Fighter, which is a Watt, and thankfully, it's also pretty good for the theme itself, so let's take a look. Watt Psychic Fighting Porter is a quick play spell card that special summons up to 2 level 3 or lower light monsters from your hand. If you summon 2 monsters with the same original type, those monsters can attack directly this turn. And if they have the same original level, they can't be destroyed by battle this turn. So the attacking directly part seems a little goofy since so many Watts already do that, but as it turns out, that's an effect that only the level 4 Watts have, meaning you can use this to give that effect to our smaller Watts for some chip damage. Granted, this doesn't mean a lot for many of them, but Watt Beta and Barracks can now do some hand ripping for whatever that's worth. It also might help to establish the Watt Hopper lock by getting 2 of them out of your hand at the same time. And remember, it summons any level 3 or lower light monster, so if you have any of those off-theme teched in, you can drop those out as well. This can act either as a surprise battle phase trick, a way to defend yourself during your opponent's turn, or just to get material out of your hand to make some plays. It's even searchable off of Watt Train for crying out loud. And you know what else are level 3 and lower light monsters? Ones that can only be special summoned by a card effect? Ones that are associated with a printed monster because it looks an awful lot like Driver? That's right, Psy-Frames! It's only a matter of time before we tie Watts into the S-Force canon and then into the whole Yu-Gi-Oh! Multiverse. And that is everything that was released in 2023, around 150 cards. That was wild. I hope you enjoyed, because we are definitely changing the format of this around. Keep an eye out for when Legacy of Destruction gets released in the TCG, as we'll be doing this on a more frequent basis so we don't burn ourselves out, and so we get that info to you in a more timely fashion. Until then though, what cards were you most happy to see released in this last year? Which ones do you think made an actual difference, and which ones just flopped? And is there anything you're hoping will show up in 2024? Let me know down below, and as always, please make sure to like the video if you liked it, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and share this video with somebody you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode is brought to you by my lovely patrons, as well as the wonderful people over at Dragon Shield. Get the sleeves as strong as dragon scales and save 5% on your order by using coupon code GoldenNova at checkout. Today's episode was also brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commanders Frankie and Marluxia is a Girl, Nebula Navigator's 3rd Dynasty, Ada Basilisk, Adam Zajdel, Andrew Newman, Kane Senpai, Chibi Gohan, Christopher Fuss, Clockswork, Dark Dragon X830, Emily Chan, Eric, Aaron the World Breaker, Garland Chaos, Genesis Yu-Gi-Oh!, Green Knight, Great Big Pillock, Hairbear, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Howling Zangetsu, Hydracraft 135, Iron Zero, Iskander 711, Mana Charge, Marion James E. Picata, Mega Combi, Millennia Asta, Muzuki Clark, Nathan Vig, Natiel Lee Alexander, Orozco 09096, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, Red Eyes Jackalow, RJ the Jank Monarch, Sammy Haim, Serenity Towns, Sir Knight JCB, Sim Antares, The Wizard Moose, URTV 667 and Xander Wolfensberger, Cosmic Crusaders Alpha Sly, Almento 5010, A Random Pup, Ariel Kersey, Beluga Masta, Blitzwolf, Blue Gem, Borger with a Shotgun, Chaz Ghost, Corbinisms, Danny Bound, Dr. Reaper RIP, Drachenwald, Eki Bullock, Eva Padilla, Hike Boyagian, Herbal D, Inblink, Jester Designs, Kale the Dragon, Carp, Kevon Public, King Scarlet Yu-Gi-Oh!, Lemon Yu-Gi-Oh!, Lord Whoop-De-Doo, Manga Pages, Matt Simmons, Mick Spoofy, Michael Shimabukuro, Mustafa Aiden, Nitromo, Shizuka Nijimura, Sophie, apparently, Stephen Williamson, Taylor Seymour, the legendary Raven, and Zaldreka, as well as the lovely Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. If you'd like to help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, get my videos early, be a part of these credits, and many other awesome perks, it would mean the world to me if you checked out the link to my Patreon in the description or consider joining as a YouTube member. And if you missed part 1, check it out here, and if you'd like to see a playlist of all the videos covering the cards we just talked about, I've got that right here for you as well. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. So applying a debuff, fuck off. My fucking, I got really mad at my space heater there. I'm sorry. We have archetypes for both the police and firefighters. So when do we get a big ol' burp? How are you gonna make an effect so flavorful but give no one a chance to understand why? Why? Don't add those whys in, I just had to say it.
It's not too big of an ass. Oops.